Valerie, why are you sitting there? I don't remember inviting you, she sneered when she spotted me at Madeline's wedding, her voice dripping with disdain. Madeline's next words cut deep. Get out of here, you unemployed loser. You're just here to embarrass me. Her cruelty shattered any lingering goodwill I had harbored for her. Defeated, I muttered, "Fine, I'll stay out of your life," and quietly exited. As I left, a sudden commotion erupted, drowning out Madeline's cries for help. Leaving the venue, I walked alongside Conrad, my husband whom I'd married a few years ago. "I'm Valerie, a freelance illustrator," I began, recounting my current circumstances. Conrad, often away for work, was my pillar of support. Then, life threw a curveball. News arrived that my mother had fallen down the stairs back home, fracturing her leg. While not life-threatening, she needed care during her recovery. The looming question remained, who would be there to provide it? Dad had recently injured his back and relied on a walking stick, leaving him unable to assist Mom. I initially hoped my sister Madeline, who still lived at home, could pitch in while I offered weekend support. However, Madeline dismissed Mom's injury, insisting it's just a fracture she can manage on her own. Her indifference and frequent insensitive remarks made me doubt her reliability in caring for Mom. Eventually, I made the decision to move back home to take care of Mom while Conrad was away. While my parents welcomed my return, Madeline did not share their enthusiasm. "Why are you back? You're in the way," she grumbled whenever our paths crossed in the kitchen or living room. Whether out of long-standing animosity or jealousy, her hostility made living under the same roof challenging, prompting me to avoid confrontation with her. Despite my efforts to focus on caring for Mom, Madeline continued to antagonize me. I took on Mom's household responsibilities, enduring Madeline's criticisms of my cooking and even finding laundry strewn in my room on occasion. Though her actions were immature, I chose not to engage. 2 weeks after my return, a knock interrupted my thoughts, prompting me to open the door, curious about Madeline's sudden visit. "Are you ever going to work? All you do is stay home, aside from shopping or going to the hospital. You're not even working, are you?" she accused. I tried to explain that I work as a freelance illustrator for my laptop, but she didn't understand. "So you sit there drawing pictures on your laptop and expect that to count as a job? That's no different from being unemployed and holed up at home. Having someone like you in the house is the worst," she retorted angrily before storming off to her room, her footsteps echoing her frustration. A few days later, Madeline announced, "I want you to meet someone. Wait in the living room." We followed her instructions, and soon she returned with a tall, slender man whose hopeful expression seemed highlighted by the mole under his left eye. "Nice to meet you all. I'm Rodney, Madeline's fiancé. Thank you for having me here today." He greeted us warmly, extending his hand for a handshake. Surprised by the unexpected visitor, my parents and I exchanged greetings with him, unsure of what to make of this introduction. "Nice to meet you," we greeted Rodney, taken aback by the revelation that Madeline had a fiancé, a surprise to both us and our parents. As they began sharing their story, we exchanged puzzled glances. "I met Rodney at work. He's incredibly sincere, capable, and wonderful," Madeline gushed with admiration. "Don't flatter me too much," Rodney chuckled, clearly enjoying the attention. They laughed and reminisced about their first meeting, what drew them to each other, and their future plans together. Rodney spoke fondly of Madeline's outgoing personality, which struck me as odd since the Madeline I knew was often rebellious, self-centered, and lacked empathy. It was hard to reconcile this description with the sister I grew up with. "I really want to marry him. Please give us your blessing," Madeline implored our parents, her eyes earnest. From my perspective, Rodney seemed too good for Madeline, and I had no objections to their union. Surprisingly, my parents shared the sentiment. Though caught off guard by the news, they smiled warmly and offered their blessings for the marriage. After Rodney left, while tidying up the tea and snacks, Madeline confronted me. "Jealous, aren't you, Valerie?" "Jealous of what? I'm marrying a wonderful, good-looking, high-earning man, something you could never pull off," she taunted with a smug smile. I met her gaze calmly. "I'm not jealous. I'm genuinely happy you found someone so wonderful," I replied evenly. Her smile faltered, clearly not expecting such a response. She sighed dramatically, her tone dripping with condescension. "The snacks you served Rodney were so cheap. Couldn't you have prepared something more upscale? But I guess being unemployed, you can't afford it." If I had known you were bringing your fiancé, I would have arranged something appropriate. You really should have picked up on my happy vibe lately. I hate how you can't read a room. As I looked at Madeline, I couldn't help but wonder how sustainable her marriage would be. That night, I felt concerned for Rodney. I reached out to Conrad as I often did when feeling lonely. His voice on the other end of the line was a comforting routine, helping me through the emotional weight of the situation. I told him about Madeline bringing her fiancé. Wow, Madeline has a fiancé. That's great news. Yes, his name is Rodney Bland. He seems too good for her. As soon as I mentioned that, Conrad's demeanor shifted. Wait, did you say Rodney Bland? Yes, why? What's wrong? Conrad's voice turned grave as he accurately described Rodney's appearance, mannerisms, and the distinctive mole under his left eye. Stunned, I asked, "Are you serious?" "Valerie, you need to tell Madeline to reconsider marrying Rodney. He's a scam artist." My heart sank. What? Are you sure? Rodney used to work for me. He left years ago after we discovered he was scamming multiple women out of their money and disappearing. I've been trying to track him down ever since. I stopped short of contacting the victims directly. We need to be absolutely sure it's him. Get a photo of Rodney from Madeline, and let's verify. Okay, I agreed, feeling a mix of disbelief and urgency. The next day, I approached Madeline under the guise of wanting a photo of Rodney to draw a caricature for their welcome board. She grumbled but reluctantly handed over the photo. When Conrad saw it, his expression hardened. That's definitely him, Rodney the scam artist. You need to convince her to reconsider before she loses any money, Conrad urged. I was planning to do that anyway. Despite our differences, I want Madeline to be happy, I affirmed, feeling the weight of responsibility as her older sister. I wasted no time in confronting Madeline with the truth about Rodney. She scoffed in disbelief. You're just jealous and trying to ruin my fiancé's reputation. I'm not. Conrad told me everything. Please, Madeline, reconsider. You deserve better, I pleaded earnestly. I persisted in my efforts to persuade her daily, but each attempt only fueled her anger. She refused to listen, and her animosity towards me grew. I even enlisted our parents to reason with her, but when Madeline realized it was at my behest, her hostility intensified. She began to harass me openly, bursting into my room to berate me for being unemployed or banging on my door to disrupt my work. Despite neighbors' complaints, their hostility towards me persisted unchecked. I had reached the end of my patience and goodwill as her sister. While some might argue, she's your only sister, you should keep trying. There's a limit to what I can do for someone who refuses to listen and continually harasses me. I resigned myself to seeking advice from Conrad and my parents on how to proceed. On the day of the wedding, I arrived with a modest wedding gift and entered the opulent venue. The setting was grand, the food lavish, and Madeline's friends and relatives were already immersed in the celebration. As I observed the sumptuous spread being served, I noticed something unsettling. No drinks had been offered to me while my parents were enjoying a full-course meal nearby. When I queried the staff, they promised to check on it and disappeared. Moments later, Madeline, resplendent in a pristine white wedding gown, approached me, the click of her heels echoing in the grand hall. Valerie, why are you sitting there? I don't recall inviting you, she remarked coldly. Not just myself, but also my parents, the guests, and even the staff turned towards Madeline in astonishment. The lively venue, alive with chatter just moments ago, fell into an eerie silence, punctuated by hushed murmurs. Despite being the focal point of this negative attention, Madeline regarded me with a smug expression. You have the nerve to show up here after insulting my fiancé? Unbelievable. Oh, but I guess being unemployed means you don't understand basic manners, she sneered. My parents, standing beside me, intervened. Madeline, stop this. It's your wedding day. Ignoring their pleas, Madeline persisted. How can I enjoy my wedding if people know my sister is unemployed? Just leave, you're embarrassing me. With a heavy sigh, I rose from my seat. After sharing a concerned glance with my parents, I met Madeline's gaze squarely. I came here to celebrate your wedding as your sister, but clearly you don't want that, I said, feeling the weight of her words. It's a shame. Who wouldn't want to be supported by someone who's unemployed like me? Fine then, I'm leaving. One more thing. Are you absolutely sure you won't regret this if I walk out that door? Because if I do, it might be the end of our sisterhood. Perfect, she responded, cutting me off. Just go. It's better this way. Any remaining affection and love for her vanished in that moment. Fine, I told Madeline firmly. Consider us done. Don't contact me again. As I walked away, I could hear Madeline arguing with her parents behind me, but it was no longer my concern. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Conrad's number. You can come in now, I said quietly. There's no need to wait any longer. Understood, Conrad replied, his voice steady as he relayed the message. Moments later, a group of women who had been waiting outside rushed into the venue. Get him, Rodney. Don't let him get away. Outside, the echoes of angry shouts and gasps from the surprised guests reached me. Moments later, the door burst open, and Rodney, the groom, dashed out, his face drenched in sweat. He attempted to flee, but Conrad, strategically positioned nearby, swiftly apprehended him. Got you, Rodney. You're not going anywhere, Conrad declared firmly. Conrad, what the hell? Madeline's furious voice cut through the commotion as she and a group of women hurried over to confront the bewildered Rodney. Are you trying to ruin our wedding? Get away from me, Conrad. Madeline lashed out, lunging at him, but I intervened, grabbing her arm to restrain her. Startled at first, Madeline's expression quickly twisted into rage as she turned on me, seizing my collar. This is your doing, isn't it? You're despicable. How many times did I warn you to stay out of my business, especially about Rodney? As I spoke, I turned towards Rodney and gestured towards the group of women surrounding him. Rodney here has been dating these women and scamming them out of their money. They're planning to take legal action against him. What? Are you kidding me? This isn't a joke, Madeline, I said sternly, looking at Rodney, who avoided eye contact, clearly uneasy. Madeline, stunned, muttered, Rodney, you can't be serious. Rodney, visibly shaken, looked down and attempted a smile as he addressed the women around him. Why bother with lawsuits? Let's settle this. I'm about to marry a wealthy woman. I can compensate you, right? Me? Wealthy? Madeline trembled as she spoke. I don't have that kind of money. What? What? I lied about being wealthy, so I can't pay any settlement or damages. What then? What about the $20,000 you've been giving me? That was for our wedding. You said to trust you with it, so I did. You didn't spend it all, did you? Madeline demanded incredulously. I blew through that $20,000 in a day, Rodney admitted with a nonchalant shrug. What? Are you serious? Give it back, my $20,000. Madeline's voice cracked with anger and betrayal. The exchange left everyone present dumbfounded. Rodney, exposed as a scammer who exploited women for money, and Madeline, revealed to have deceived about her wealth to secure their marriage. It was a surreal match indeed. The guests who had gathered due to the commotion reacted with whispers and wide-eyed disbelief. After a heated argument with Rodney, Madeline noticed the attention and erupted in frustration. What are you all staring at? Get out. The wedding is over. Just leave your gifts and go, she commanded, motioning for the staff to escort the guests out. Then, in a sudden change of direction, she rushed over to me. Valerie, you were right. If only I had listened to you, none of this would have happened. I'm sorry. Please help me, Madeline pleaded, her tone more desperate than sincere. But her words rang hollow, and Conrad, standing beside me, silently shook his head. I nodded in agreement, pulling away from her touch. I told you, we're done. We're strangers now. I won't help you, I asserted firmly. What? How can you say that, Valerie? You're abandoning your own sister, Madeline protested, her voice tinged with disbelief and desperation. I don't have a sister anymore. Goodbye, Madeline. Let's never cross paths again, I replied, turning away from her. Wait, Valerie, please. Ignoring her cries, Conrad and I left the venue. Later, through my parents, I learned about Madeline and Rodney's fate. Madeline was disowned and expelled from the family home, forced to move in with Rodney due to their legal marriage. Rodney faced lawsuits from the women he had deceived, leading him to take out loans to settle the debts. The strain of financial ruin ultimately shattered their marriage, ending in divorce. Now both destitute, their once promising union had crumbled. About 6 months after Madeline's ill-fated wedding, my mother's fracture healed, and life resumed its usual pace. My temporary assignment concluded, and I returned home, visiting my parents periodically. A year later, Conrad and I welcomed our first child, blessed with the support of our loving families.
The phone rings, jolting me out of my thoughts. I glance at the caller ID and freeze. It's Sadie, my daughter-in-law. My stomach twists into knots as I hesitate, my finger hovering over the answer button. Why would she be calling me out of the blue like this? We've barely spoken since the falling out with my son Jack. I take a deep breath and answer, trying to keep my voice steady. Hello? Meredith, hi! Sadie's overly cheerful voice grates on my nerves. I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, Jack and I were hoping you could come over for dinner tonight. We have something special planned. I frown, immediately suspicious. Dinner? Tonight? Isn't this a bit last minute? I know, I'm sorry, Sadie gushes. It's just that we have some exciting news to share, and we really want you to be a part of it. Please say you'll come. I hesitate, my mind racing. It's been months since I've seen my granddaughter, Avery. Not since I confronted Sadie about the bruises I found on Avery's arms. Bruises I'm convinced Sadie caused. But when I reported my suspicions, Sadie twisted everything around, making me look like a mentally unstable grandmother. The authorities found no proof. In the end, Jack believed his manipulative wife's lies over his own mother's concerns. The painful memories flashed through my mind. Marrying my college sweetheart Tham, the love of my life. Raising our twin boys Jack and Liam, the lights of our lives. Becoming a young widow far too soon when a drunk driver stole Tham away. Pouring my grief into building a successful catering business to support my sons. The joy of becoming a grandmother when Jack and his new wife Sadie had little Avery. And then the mounting dread as my instincts screamed that something was wrong. The way Avery flinched from Sadie's touch, the mysterious injuries Sadie couldn't explain. My world crumbling as everyone turned against me for trying to protect my granddaughter. Meredith, are you still there? Sadie's insistent voice snaps me back to the present. I close my eyes briefly, steeling myself. As much as it pains me, I can't pass up this chance to see Avery. To make sure she's okay, even if I have to play nice with Sadie to do it. Yes, I'm here, I reply, forcing a neutral tone. Dinner sounds lovely. What time should I be there? After noting down the details and ending the call, I lean back in my chair, my heart heavy. I have a bad feeling about this sudden invitation. In my bones, I know Sadie is up to something. I just pray that whatever it is won't put Avery in harm's way again. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I grab my purse and keys. If Sadie thinks she can fool me twice, she's got another thing coming. This time, I'll be ready for her games. This time, I won't let her hurt the ones I love most. Not again, not ever. It's been 3 months since that uncomfortable dinner at Jack and Sadie's house. 3 months of walking on eggshells, trying to maintain a relationship with my granddaughter Avery while tiptoeing around Sadie's mercurial moods. I've been watching her like a hawk, but Sadie's a master at putting on a show when others are around. Today, Sadie called me in a panic, begging me to watch Avery while she runs off to yet another last-minute audition. She's been chasing her failed acting dreams for years, constantly leaving Avery in my care with barely a moment's notice. I don't mind spending time with my granddaughter, but I worry about the instability Sadie brings to her life. When I arrive at their house, Sadie practically shoves Avery into my arms, already halfway out the door. Thanks so much, Meredith. You're a lifesaver. She calls over her shoulder before peeling out of the driveway. I sigh and look down at Avery, who clings to me tightly. My heart clenches as I notice a fresh bruise peeking out from under her sleeve. Gently, I pull back the fabric to get a better look. Avery, sweetie, how did you get this owie? I ask, keeping my voice soft and non-threatening. Avery's eyes fill with tears. I fell down. The rehearsed response sets off alarm bells in my head. Kneeling down to Avery's level, I take her tiny hands in mine. Avery, you know you can tell Grandma Murmur anything, right? I'm here to keep you safe. Avery hesitates, glancing around fearfully as if Sadie might pop out any second. Then in a whisper she confesses, Mommy gets mad sometimes. She grabs my arm too hard. White-hot rage courses through my veins, but I force myself to stay calm for Avery's sake. Thank you for telling me the truth, brave girl. I won't let Mommy hurt you anymore. That evening, I confront Sadie the moment she returns. I lay out the evidence of Avery's injuries and repeat what Avery told me. But Sadie just laughs in my face. You're being paranoid, Meredith. Avery's a clumsy child, and you know how kids exaggerate, she scoffs, rolling her eyes. I know what I saw, Sadie. If you ever lay a hand on Avery again, I swear I'll... Sadie cuts me off, her eyes flashing with malice. You'll what? Who do you think Jack will believe? His devoted wife or his crazy old mother? I can ruin you, Meredith. I can make sure you never see Avery again. Her words knock the wind out of me. I know she's capable of following through on her threats. I've seen how she's wrapped Jack around her finger, poisoning him against me. In a last-ditch effort, I call Child Services to report Sadie's abuse. But just as Sadie predicted, they find no concrete proof. It's my word against hers. And when Jack finds out about the investigation, he's furious. How could you accuse Sadie of something so horrible? She's an amazing mother, he shouts, pacing angrily in front of me. Jack, please, I'm telling you the truth. Sadie is not who you think she is, I plead, desperate for him to see reason. But Sadie has already gotten to him. No, Mom, Sadie's right. You're unhinged. You need help. The betrayal cuts deep. My own son, siding with his abusive wife over his own mother. I can hardly breathe through the pain. In the end, Sadie makes good on her threats. She slaps me with a restraining order, banning me from seeing Avery. Jack cuts me out of his life completely, believing Sadie's lies about my supposed mental instability. Alone in my house, I crumple to the floor, my heart shattered beyond repair. How did it come to this? How did I let Sadie destroy my family? But even as despair threatens to swallow me whole, a flicker of determination sparks to life in my chest. I won't let Sadie win. I won't let her corrupt my granddaughter. Somehow, some way, I will find a way to expose her true colors and save Avery, no matter the cost. Months drag by, each day a painful reminder of the gaping hole in my heart where Avery used to be. The restraining order Sadie slapped me with keeps me away from my granddaughter, and Jack refuses to take my calls. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of helplessness and despair. But even in my darkest moments, I refuse to give up. I hire a private investigator to dig into Sadie's past, desperate for any shred of evidence that might expose her true nature. What the PI uncovers makes my blood run cold. Sadie, it turns out, has a history of latching on to wealthy men, bleeding them dry, and then moving on to her next target. She's left a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts in her wake, and now she's set her sights on my son. Armed with this new information, I confront Liam, Jack's twin brother. I know he's always had a soft spot for Sadie, but surely he can't condone her behavior. Liam, please, you have to help me. Sadie is bad news. She's hurting Avery and using Jack for his money, I plead, showing him the evidence the PI gathered. Liam shifts uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. I don't know, Mom. Sadie's always been good to me. Maybe you're just overreacting. Frustration boils up inside me. Open your eyes, Liam. She's manipulating you, just like she's manipulating Jack. Can't you see that? But Liam just shakes his head, backing away. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't get involved. This is between you and Sadie. I watch him walk away, my heart sinking. Even my own flesh and blood won't stand up for what's right. Desperate, I turn to Jack, hoping that the proof of Sadie's financial infidelity will be enough to snap him out of her spell. I corner him at his office, laying out the documents that show Sadie has been siphoning money from his company to fund her lavish lifestyle. Jack's face hardens as he flips through the papers. For a moment, I think I've finally gotten through to him. But then Sadie bursts in, crocodile tears streaming down her face. Jack, baby, don't listen to her. She's crazy, remember? She's just trying to tear us apart. Sadie wails, clinging to Jack's arm. Jack hesitates, glancing between me and Sadie. I hold my breath, praying he'll finally see the truth. But Sadie's hold on him is too strong. Jack's expression turns to one of disgust as he throws the documents back at me. Enough, Mom. I'm sick of your lies and manipulations. Sadie is my wife, and I trust her completely. I want you out of my life, for good this time. His words hit me like a physical blow. I stumble back, my vision blurring with tears. Jack, please, I'm just trying to protect you. To protect Avery, I whisper, my voice cracking. But Jack is already turning away, his arm around Sadie's shoulders. Stay away from my family, Mom. I mean it. You're dead to me. The world tilts on its axis as I watch my son walk away, choosing his abuser over his own mother. The pain is too much to bear. I clutch at my chest, gasping for air as a searing agony rips through me. The last thing I remember before everything goes black is the sound of Sadie's mocking laughter echoing in my ears. I wake up in a hospital bed, hooked up to beeping machines. The doctors tell me I suffered a severe heart attack brought on by stress and emotional trauma. They urge me to rest, to avoid any further upsets. But how can I rest when my granddaughter is still in danger, when my own sons have turned their backs on me? Staring at the sterile white ceiling, I make a vow to myself. No matter what it takes, no matter how long, I will find a way to save Avery and expose Sadie for the monster she truly is, even if it destroys me in the process. A year has passed since my heart attack, a year of painful isolation and unanswered questions. Jack and Liam remain stubbornly out of reach, and every attempt to contact Avery is met with stony silence. The ache in my chest has nothing to do with my physical health and everything to do with the gaping hole where my family used to be. So when Sadie shows up on my doorstep one rainy evening, bruised and sobbing, I'm equal parts shocked and wary. She collapses into my arms, her body shaking with tremors. "Meredith, please, you have to help me. Jack, he's out of control. He's been hitting me, and I'm afraid he's going to hurt Avery next," she gasps out between hiccuping breaths. I stiffen, my mind reeling. Could I have been wrong all this time? Could Jack, my gentle, loving son, truly be capable of such violence? I didn't know where else to go. "I'm so sorry for everything, for turning Jack against you. I was just scared," Sadie whimpers, clinging to me like a lifeline. Against my better judgment, I find myself softening. The bruises on her face and arms look all too real, and the terror in her eyes is palpable. "Shh, it's okay. You're safe now," I murmur, guiding her into the house. Over the next few days, as Sadie hides out in my guest room, she spins a tale of horror and abuse that makes my stomach churn. She describes how Jack flew into a rage when she confronted him about his drinking, how he slammed her against the wall and choked her until she blacked out. She shows me the finger-shaped bruises on her throat, the cigarette burns on her thighs. "He said he'd kill me if I ever left him, Meredith. He said he'd make sure I never saw Avery again," Sadie confesses, her voice hollow with despair. But doubt gnaws at me, warring with the instinct to protect. I think back to all the times I suspected Sadie of hurting Avery, of manipulating Jack. Could I have misjudged her so badly? Sadie seems to sense my hesitation. She takes my hands in hers, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I know I've given you every reason not to trust me, Meredith, but I swear I'm telling you the truth. Jack is a monster, and Avery and I need your help to escape him." Looking into her pleading face, I make a decision. I can't turn my back on her, not if there's even a chance that Avery is in danger. Over the next few weeks, as Sadie and I grow closer, I start to question everything I thought I knew. She's so different from the cold, calculating woman I once believed her to be. She's vulnerable, broken, desperate for a mother's love and guidance. I find myself opening up to her, sharing stories of Jack and Liam's childhood, of my own struggles as a young widow. Sadie listens intently, offering comfort and understanding in return. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I don't feel so alone. But even as I start to let my guard down, nagging doubts persist. Something about Sadie's story doesn't quite add up. The way she flinches at odd moments, the inconsistencies in her timeline. I try to push my suspicions aside, telling myself I'm just being paranoid. Until the day I accidentally overhear a phone call that shatters everything. Sadie is in the guest room, the door cracked open, just a sliver. Her voice floats out, low and urgent. "I can't keep this up much longer, Liam." She's starting to ask too many questions. We need to move forward with the plan before she figures out what's really going on. Ice floods my veins as the truth hits me like a sledgehammer. Sadie hasn't changed at all. She's been playing me for a fool, just like she played Jack. And now she's plotting with my own son to destroy what's left of my family. Betrayal tastes like ashes in my mouth as I confront the ugly truth. Sadie, the woman I've opened my home and heart to, is nothing more than a viper in sheep's clothing. The bruises, the tears, the tales of abuse, all a carefully crafted lie to manipulate me. I think back to all the inconsistencies in her story, the nagging doubts I pushed aside in my desperation to believe her. How could I have been so blind? Determined to uncover the full extent of her deception, I wait until Sadie leaves for one of her mysterious errands and slip into the guest room. It doesn't take long to find what I'm looking for, a small memory card tucked inside her jewelry box. With shaking hands, I insert the card into my laptop. The screen fills with video after damning video of Sadie coaching Avery, my sweet, innocent granddaughter, to lie. Remember, Avery, when Grandma asks about the bruises, you say Daddy did it. You say he hits you and Mommy, okay? Sadie's sickly sweet voice makes my stomach turn. Avery, her eyes wide and confused, nods obediently. Daddy hits me and Mommy. Bile rises in my throat as the truth sinks in. Sadie has been orchestrating this whole charade, using her own daughter as a pawn in her twisted game, and I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. I'm so engrossed in the horrifying footage that I don't hear Sadie return until it's too late. She bursts into the room, her face twisting with rage when she sees what I'm watching. You nosy bitch, you just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? She snarls, lunging for the laptop. I jerk it out of her reach, my own anger boiling over. How could you, Sadie? How could you use your own child like this? Avery deserves so much better than a mother like you. Sadie throws her head back and laughs, the sound chilling me to the bone. Oh, spare me the righteous indignation, Meredith. You're just as pathetic as the rest of them, so desperate for love, for family, that you'll believe anything I say. She stalks closer, her eyes glittering with malice. You want to know the truth? Fine. I never loved Jack. I never loved Avery. They were just means to an end, a way to get what I wanted. I recoil in horror, my heart breaking for my son, for my granddaughter. And what is it you want, Sadie? Money? Power? Sadie smirks, her lips curling into a cruel sneer. All of the above, and more. I want to destroy you, Meredith. I want to take everything you love and burn it to the ground, just like you tried to do to me. The pieces click into place with sickening clarity. All the lies, the manipulation, the abuse, it was all a twisted form of revenge, a way to punish me for seeing through her facade. You're sick, Sadie. You need help, I whisper, backing away slowly. Sadie's eyes narrow, her gaze locking onto the laptop clutched to my chest. Give me the memory card, Meredith. Give it to me, and maybe I'll let you live. But I'm done being her victim, her pawn. I've spent too long letting her control me, letting her poison my family. In one swift motion, I yank the memory card from the laptop and shove it down my shirt, into my bra. Sadie shrieks with fury, launching herself at me like a rabid animal. We grapple on the floor, a tangle of clawing fingers and flying fists. Sadie is younger, stronger, fueled by a manic rage. But I have something she doesn't, a mother's love, a grandmother's fierce determination to protect her own. I manage to grab a heavy paperweight from the desk, slamming it against Sadie's temple with all my might. She crumples to the ground, blood trickling from the gash on her head. For a moment I'm frozen, staring at her unconscious form in shock. Then, with trembling fingers, I reach for my phone and dial 911. I need the police, right away. I have evidence of a crime. Please hurry. As sirens wail in the distance, I slump against the wall, my heart racing. I know the battle is far from over, but for the first time in years, I feel a flicker of hope. Sadie's reign of terror ends today. I'll make sure of it. The memory card feels like a lead weight against my chest as I watch Sadie's unconscious form, waiting for the police to arrive. Part of me is tempted to flee, to take the evidence and run. But I know I can't do that. I have to see this through, for Avery's sake. With shaking hands, I retrieve my phone and start recording. If Sadie wakes up, I need her confession on tape. I need irrefutable proof of her crimes. Minutes tick by, each one feeling like an eternity. Just as I'm about to give up hope, Sadie stirs, groaning as she clutches her bleeding head. You fucking bitch, she hisses, struggling to sit up. You're going to pay for that. I keep the camera trained on her, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. It's over, Sadie. The police are on their way. They'll see the videos of you coaching Avery to lie. They'll know what you did. Sadie's eyes widen, then narrow into slits. You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing the victim, the concerned grandmother, but you're just as twisted as I am, Meredith. You're the one who turned your own sons against each other. You're the one who couldn't let go, couldn't accept that Jack chose me over you. I flinch at her words, the grain of truth in them stinging like salt in a wound. I may have made mistakes, Sadie, but I never abused a child. I never manipulated and lied and cheated like you. Sadie lets out a harsh bark of laughter. Oh, but you did. You lied to yourself every single day. You pretended to be this perfect, loving mother, when in reality, you were just a pathetic old woman desperate for attention. She staggers to her feet, her face twisted into a grotesque mask of hatred. You want my confession? Fine, I did it. I coached Avery to say Jack abused her. I siphoned money from his company. I fucked his brother. And I'd do it all again just to see the look on your face when you realized you'd lost everything. Nausea churns in my gut at the sheer depravity of her words. Why, Sadie? Why go to such lengths to destroy my family? Sadie's lips curl into a sneer. Because I could. Because it was easy. Because none of you ever saw me coming. She takes a step forward, her eyes glinting with a manic light. And now I'm going to make sure you never tell anyone what you know. Fear lances through me as Sadie lunges, her hands outstretched like claws. I dodge to the side, but not fast enough. She catches me by the hair, yanking me backwards. We tumble to the ground, my phone skittering out of reach. Sadie straddles my chest, her fingers wrapping around my throat. You should have minded your own business, you meddling cunt, she snarls, tightening her grip. Black spots dance across my vision as I gasp for air. I claw at Sadie's hands, but she's too strong, too fueled by rage and desperation. Just as I'm about to black out, the door bursts open. Sadie's weight is suddenly gone, replaced by blessed oxygen flooding my lungs. Through blurry eyes, I see Jack hauling Sadie off me, his face a mask of fury. Get off her, you psychotic bitch! Sadie shrieks and thrashes in his grip, spitting curses. I'll kill you! I'll kill all of you! But Jack doesn't let go. He wrestles her to the ground, pinning her arms behind her back. It's over, Sadie. I know everything. I heard your confession. The police are on their way, he says, his voice shaking with emotion. Sadie goes limp, her fight draining away as the reality of her situation sinks in. You set me up. You knew I'd come here. Jack nods, his jaw tight. I've been onto you for months, Sadie. I just needed proof. And thanks to my mother, now I have it. He looks up at me, his eyes shining with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I let her tear our family apart. Sobs rack my chest as I crawl towards my son, my baby boy. He gathers me into his arms, holding me tight as the sound of sirens fills the air. It's okay, Mom. It's over now. She can't hurt us anymore. And for the first time in years, I believe him. The aftermath of Sadie's arrest is a whirlwind of police statements, media scrutiny, and legal proceedings. Through it all, Jack remains by my side, a steadfast presence as we navigate the fallout of his wife's betrayal. I'm so sorry, Mom, he says for the 100th time, his eyes haunted by guilt and regret. I should have listened to you from the start. I should have seen through her lies. I squeeze his hand, offering what comfort I can. You couldn't have known, Jack. Sadie fooled us all. The important thing is that we're together now, and Avery is safe. At the mention of his daughter, Jack's face crumples. I failed her, Mom. I failed my own child. What kind of father am I? The kind who loves his daughter enough to admit his mistakes and fight for her, I say firmly. Avery is lucky to have you, Jack. Don't ever doubt that. As the days turn into weeks, the true extent of Sadie's crimes comes to light. The police uncover a trail of fraud, embezzlement, and blackmail stretching back years. It seems Sadie had been planning her revenge long before she ever met Jack. And then there's Liam, my other son, the one I thought had betrayed me along with Sadie. When he finally comes to see me, his face is etched with shame and remorse. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispers, his voice choked with tears. I never meant for any of this to happen. Sadie, she had something on me, something I couldn't let Jack find out about. My heart aches for my broken, misguided boy. What did she have on you, Liam? He takes a shuddering breath, avoiding my gaze. I embezzled money from Jack's company years ago. I was in debt, and I didn't know what else to do. Sadie found out, and she used it to blackmail me into helping her. Anger and disappointment war with the overwhelming love I feel for my son. Oh, Liam, why didn't you come to me? To Jack, we would have helped you. Liam shakes his head, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I was too ashamed. I thought I could handle it on my own, but Sadie, she's a master manipulator. She made me believe that I had no choice but to do what she said. I pull my son into my arms, holding him tight as he sobs against my shoulder. It's okay, Liam. We'll get through this together, as a family. And we do. Jack files for divorce and sole custody of Avery, using Sadie's confession and the evidence from the memory card to prove her unfit as a mother. Liam turns himself in for his role in the embezzlement, ready to face the consequences of his actions. Through it all, Avery remains our shining light, our reason to keep going. With Sadie behind bars, Jack and I worked together to give her the stable, loving home she deserves. "I love you, Grandma," she whispers one night as I tuck her into bed, her little arms wrapped around my neck. Tears sting my eyes as I hug her close, marveling at the resilience of this brave, beautiful child. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in this world." As I watch her drift off to sleep, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. For so long I'd been consumed by anger and bitterness, by the need for revenge against the woman who'd stolen my family. But now, with Sadie gone and my sons by my side, I realize that the only thing that truly matters is the love we have for each other. We may be broken, but we're not beyond repair. With time, patience, and the unshakable bond of family, I know we'll heal. We'll find our way back to each other, stronger than ever before. And that, in the end, is the sweetest revenge of all. 5 years have passed since Sadie's arrest, and life has settled into a new normal. Jack and Avery moved in with me after the divorce, and together we've built a home filled with love, laughter, and healing. Avery, now a precocious 10-year-old, has blossomed under our care. Gone is the timid, frightened child she once was, replaced by a confident, vibrant girl who lights up every room she enters. Today, as we celebrate Avery's birthday, I can't help but marvel at how far we've come. The backyard is filled with balloons and streamers, the air thick with the scent of barbecue and the sound of children's laughter. Jack catches my eye from across the lawn, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He looks lighter, unburdened by the weight of Sadie's betrayal. In the years since the divorce, he's thrown himself into being the best father he can be, determined to make up for lost time. As I watch him scoop Avery into his arms, spinning her around until she shrieks with glee, my heart swells with pride and gratitude. My son, my brave, resilient boy, has come so far. And then there's Liam, the prodigal son returned. After serving his time for embezzlement, he's worked hard to earn back our trust, to prove himself worthy of a second chance. It hasn't been easy, but slowly, surely, we've welcomed him back into the fold. Avery adores her Uncle Liam, and he dotes on her in return, showering her with affection and attention. As the party winds down and the guests start to leave, Avery bounds over to me, her face flushed with excitement. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" I smile, pulling her onto my lap. "Of course, sweetheart, what is it?" Avery fidgets, suddenly shy. "I was wondering, would it be okay if I called you Mom?" Tears spring to my eyes at the unexpected request. "Oh, Avery, are you sure that's what you want?" She nods, her little face solemn. "You've always been like a mom to me, Grandma. You take care of me, and you love me, just like a real mom should. And I love you too." I hug her close, my heart bursting with emotion. "I would be honored to be your mom, Avery. I love you more than anything in this world." Jack, who's been listening nearby, comes over to join us, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Avery, and I know it's what your grandpa would have wanted too." We sit there for a long moment, holding each other tight, basking in the warmth of our little family. It's not the family I ever expected to have, but it's the one I cherish with every fiber of my being. Later that night, as I tuck Avery into bed, she looks up at me with sleepy eyes. "Mom, can you tell me a story about Grandpa?" I settle beside her, stroking her hair as I begin to speak. "Your grandpa was the kindest, most loving man I ever knew. He would have adored you, Avery, just like I do." As I spin tales of Tom's gentle heart and quirky sense of humor, I feel his presence all around us, watching over our little family with pride and love. We've been through so much, endured so many trials and heartaches, but we've emerged stronger, more united than ever before. Sadie tried to destroy us, to tear us apart with her lies and manipulations, but in the end, she only brought us closer together, forging an unbreakable bond that will last a lifetime. As I look around at my son, my granddaughter, and the home we've built together, I know that this is what true happiness feels like. This is what it means to be a family. And no matter what the future holds, no matter what challenges we may face, I know that we'll face them together. Always. The clinking of silverware against fine china echoed through the dining room, punctuated by the occasional polite cough or forced chuckle. My smile felt tight as I surveyed the scene before me. My family gathered for our weekly dinner, a ritual that once filled me with warmth but now felt like a charade. "So, Derek," I began, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife, How are things at the office? Derek, my son-in-law, paused mid-bite, his fork hovering in the air. With a carefully crafted smile, he replied, "Couldn't be better, Lorraine. The team's been knocking it out of the park." My gaze shifted to my daughter Elise, who beamed with pride. Seeing her devotion to this man made my stomach churn. If only she knew the truth. As the conversation drifted to more mundane topics, I excused myself, feigning a need to freshen up. In truth, I needed a moment to collect my thoughts. The hall bathroom provided a brief respite, sure, but the raised voices from the dining room soon shattered the illusion of peace. "Can't keep this up forever." Derek's hushed tone carried an unmistakable edge. "We need to act fast before she catches on." My breath caught in my throat as realization dawned. He was plotting something, and it involved my late husband's company, the business I had poured my heart and soul into preserving. Pressing my ear against the door, I strained to make out Elise's muffled response. "But Mom, she'll never agree to it." "Then we don't give her a choice," Derek snapped. "This is our chance to secure our future, and I won't let anyone stand in our way, not even your mother." The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. My own daughter conspiring against me with her husband, the man I had once welcomed into our family with open arms. Tears stung my eyes as I fought the urge to burst through the door and confront them. Steeling myself, I took a deep breath and rejoined them, plastering on a smile that belied the turmoil raging within me. As I caught Derek's satisfied smirk, a newfound determination took root. He had no idea what he was up against. This was war, and I would do whatever it took to protect my husband's legacy, even if it meant going against my own flesh and blood. The days following that fateful dinner crawled by, each one more excruciating than the last. Elise remained distant, her once warm demeanor replaced by a guarded chill that cut deeper than any knife. Derek, on the other hand, strutted around with an infuriating smugness, as if he'd already won. I knew I had to act fast, but I needed proof of his misdeeds, something concrete to shatter his carefully constructed facade. That's when I stumbled upon the financial records hidden in his study. "Elise, you need to see this," I urged, thrusting the incriminating documents into her hands. Her brow furrowed as she scanned the pages. "What is all this?" "Evidence that your precious husband has been embezzling from the company," I spat, my anger boiling over. "He's been bleeding us dry for years, right under our noses." Elise recoiled as if struck, her expression a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "Mom, how could you accuse Derek of something like that? These numbers, they must be a mistake." "A mistake?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Open your eyes, Elise. That snake has been playing us both for fools." Derek chose that moment to saunter in, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene before him. "What's going on here?" "Your wife seems to have uncovered your little secret," I snarled, thrusting the documents at him. "Care to explain yourself?" For a fleeting moment, his mask slipped, revealing the ruthless predator lurking beneath, but just as quickly it was replaced by a look of feigned innocence. "Lorraine, you're not making any sense," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "These are just routine financial reports. I've done nothing wrong." "Don't lie to me," I roared, all pretense of civility abandoned. "I know you've been bleeding the company dry, and I won't let you get away with it." Derek's veneer finally cracked, his true colors bursting forth in a torrent of rage. "You stupid old woman! You have no idea what you're up against." He turned to Elise, his eyes pleading. "Sweetheart, you have to believe me. Your mother's lost her mind." Elise stood frozen, her gaze darting between us, torn between the man she loved and the mother who had raised her. In that moment, I saw the first glimmer of doubt flicker across her face. She faltered, her voice small and uncertain. "I don't know what to believe anymore." With a contemptuous sneer, Derek wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Don't worry, my love. We'll get through this together, no matter what it takes." As they turned and left the room, I sank into the nearest chair, my hands trembling with a potent mix of rage and sorrow. The battle lines had been drawn, and there would be no turning back. Derek had made his move, but he had no idea the lengths I was willing to go to protect what was mine. This was far from over. In the days that followed, the once warm atmosphere in my home had turned icy, with tension seeping through every nook and cranny. Elise avoided me like the plague, her loyalty to that snake Derek unwavering, despite the evidence of his deceit. I knew I couldn't take him on alone, not with the resources at his disposal. That's when fate intervened in the form of Jenna Williams, a young hotshot lawyer with a chip on her shoulder and a vendetta against Derek. "Mrs. Robertson, we need to talk," she announced, barging into my living room one afternoon without preamble. I eyed her warily, taking in her no-nonsense demeanor. "And you are?" "Jenna Williams, attorney at law." She thrust out a manicured hand, her grip firm and unyielding. "I represent a client who was defrauded by your son-in-law in a business deal gone wrong." My interest piqued, I motioned for her to take a seat. "I'm listening." For the next hour, Jenna laid out a damning case against Derek, detailing his web of lies, manipulation, and illegal activities. By the time she finished, my blood was boiling. "That snake has been playing us all," I growled, slamming my fist on the coffee table. "He needs to be stopped." Jenna's eyes gleamed with a predatory light. "That's where you come in, Mrs. Robertson. With your insider knowledge and my legal expertise, we can bring Derek down once and for all." I hesitated, the weight of her proposition hanging heavy in the air. Could I really go to such lengths, even if it meant turning against my own daughter? As if sensing my hesitation, Jenna leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Look, I get it. Family loyalty is a powerful thing. But ask yourself this: how far is Derek willing to go to protect his interests? Do you really think he has your daughter's best interests at heart?" Her words struck a nerve, reigniting the fury that had been simmering within me. Derek was a cancer, slowly poisoning everything he touched. If I didn't act, he would destroy not only the company, but my family as well. Squaring my shoulders, I met Jenna's gaze head-on. "All right, Miss Williams, I'm in. Let's take that son of a bitch down." A feral grin spread across her face as she extended her hand. "It's a pleasure doing business with you, Mrs. Robertson." As our hands clasped, sealing our unholy alliance, I felt a renewed sense of determination coursing through my veins. Derek might be a formidable foe, but he had no idea what he was up against. Together, Jenna and I would expose his lies and bring him to his knees, no matter the cost. The game was on, and I intended to play for keeps. The days melted into weeks as Jenna and I worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Derek. Every phone call, every late-night meeting carried the weight of our mission, to expose his misdeeds and bring him to justice, no matter the cost. "We need more," Jenna growled, slamming her fist on the table laden with financial records and incriminating documents. "This is damning, but not enough to guarantee a conviction." I pinched the bridge of my nose, exhaustion weighing heavy on my shoulders. "What else do you need? I've given you everything I could find." Jenna leveled her steely gaze at me. "We need a smoking gun, something irrefutable that proves his intent to defraud the company." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Frowning, I answered cautiously. "Hello?" "Mrs. Robertson, it's me." The tremulous voice belonged to Derek's assistant, Tina. "I have something you need to see." Within the hour, Tina was seated across from us, her hands trembling as she slid a flash drive across the table. "This contains copies of emails and financial records detailing Mr. Winslow's illegal dealings with offshore accounts." Jenna snatched up the drive, her eyes alight with a predatory gleam. "This is it. The evidence we need to bury that bastard." Tina wrung her hands, her gaze darting between us. "I couldn't stand by and let him destroy the company any longer, not after everything you and Mr. Robertson built." Reaching across the table, I covered her hand with my own, a surge of gratitude washing over me. "Thank you, Tina. You're a brave woman." She offered a weak smile before rising to her feet. "Just make sure he pays for what he's done." As the door clicked shut behind her, Jenna let out a low whistle. "She's got guts. I'll give her that." "We all do what we must." I murmured, my thoughts drifting to Elise and the sacrifices I was willing to make to protect her future. Jenna's voice snapped me back to the present. "Now that we have what we need, it's time to take that snake down once and for all." The days that followed were a whirlwind of strategy sessions and meticulous planning. We knew Derek wouldn't go down without a fight, so we had to be prepared for anything. Every move, every contingency, was calculated with surgical precision. As the crucial board meeting loomed, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Derek remained oblivious to our efforts, strutting around with his usual arrogant bravado. Little did he know, His world was about to come crashing down around him. The night before the meeting, I found myself staring out the window, watching the moonlight dance across the backyard where Elise used to play as a child. So much had changed, so many bonds frayed in the pursuit of justice. But as I clutched the damning evidence in my hands, I knew there was no turning back. Derek had made his bed, and now he would lie in it. Come morning, the game would reach its climax, and I intended to be the last one standing. The familiar hum of the office should have been comforting, but as I strode down the hallway, briefcase in hand, a sense of trepidation gnawed at me. Today was the day, the culmination of weeks of planning, strategizing, and sleepless nights. "Morning, Mrs. Robertson." Derek's cheerful voice cut through the din like a hot knife through butter. He fell into step beside me, that ever-present smirk plastered across his face. "You're looking radiant as always." I suppressed a shudder, forcing a tight smile. "Derek, I trust you're prepared for today's meeting?" "Of course," he replied, his tone dripping with false sincerity. "I always come prepared." If only he knew the truth, that this very meeting would be his undoing. Jenna and I had spent countless hours rehearsing, ensuring every detail was accounted for, every contingency planned for. As we rounded the corner, I caught sight of Elise hovering near the conference room door. Her brow furrowed when she spotted us, and I could see the conflict raging behind her eyes. "Mom," she began, her voice catching in her throat, "can we talk for a minute?" Derek shot her a warning glance, but I raised a hand, silencing him. "Of course, dear." Ushering her into a nearby office, I studied her drawn features, my heart aching at the turmoil etched into her face. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Derek swears he's innocent, but there's just something off about the way he's been acting lately." I longed to pull her into my arms, to shield her from the harsh realities we were about to face, but I knew this was a battle she needed to fight on her own. "Listen to your instincts, Elise," I murmured, cupping her cheek. "Deep down, you know the truth." She opened her mouth to respond, but a sharp rap on the door cut her off. "5 minutes to go," Jenna called out, her voice laced with urgency. With a trembling sigh, Elise stepped back, her expression hardening into a mask of determination. "We should get in there." As we filed into the conference room, the tension was palpable. Derek held court at the head of the table, flanked by his loyal cronies. But as my gaze swept across the assembled faces, I took heart in the handful of allies Jenna and I had managed to turn, men and women who had seen through Derek's lies and were ready to take a stand. "Shall we begin?" Derek's voice boomed, snapping me back to reality. This was it, the moment of truth. With a subtle nod to Jenna, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. No more games, no more deception. It was time for Derek Winslow to face the consequences of his actions. Come hell or high water, I would see him burn. The conference room descended into a tense silence as Derek launched into his opening remarks, his smooth baritone masking the venom that lurked beneath. I fought the urge to roll my eyes at his blatant attempts to cast himself as the wronged party, the victim of some grand conspiracy. Jenna caught my eye from across the table, a silent signal passing between us. It was time. "If I may interject," I called out, my voice ringing with a confidence I didn't quite feel. All eyes swiveled in my direction, and I could sense Derek's irritation simmering beneath the surface. "Mrs. Robertson," he drawled, his tone laced with forced patience. "I was under the impression this was a board meeting, not a therapy session for your delusions." A ripple of unease swept through the room, but I held my ground, leveling my gaze at the man who had once been like a son to me. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, Derek." His eyes narrowed, but I pressed on, nodding at Jenna to cue the projector. "For years, you've been bleeding this company dry through a complex web of offshore accounts and dummy corporations." As the damning financial records flickered across the screen, a hush fell over the attendees. Even Derek's staunchest allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the weight of the evidence undeniable. Derek, however, maintained his composure, a derisive chuckle escaping his lips. "Really, Lorraine? This is what you've resorted to? Slandering me with doctored documents and baseless accusations? I wouldn't be so sure about that." All heads swiveled as Tina, Derek's former assistant, stepped into the room, clutching a thick manila envelope. Derek's smug facade faltered, his eyes widening in a rare display of unguarded emotion. "Tina, what is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," she said, her voice trembling but resolute, "is that I can no longer be complicit in your crimes, Mr. Winslow." With a deft flick of her wrist, she upended the envelope, scattering its contents across the table. A damning trail of emails, bank statements, and ledgers, all bearing the irrefutable proof of Derek's illegalities. A deafening silence blanketed the room as the reality of the situation sank in. Derek's allies exchanged uneasy glances, their allegiances fracturing before our very eyes. Derek, for his part, had abandoned all pretense of civility. His handsome features contorted into a mask of rage as he rounded on me, spittle flying from his lips. "You conniving old witch! How dare you turn my own people against me?" Before anyone could react, Jenna was on her feet, her steely gaze boring into Derek's. "That's enough, Winslow. The jig is up. We have more than enough evidence to bury you in criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, you name it." Derek's chest heaved with each ragged breath, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. For a fleeting moment our gazes locked, and I saw the ugly truth laid bare. He was a soulless monster, consumed by greed and ambition. Then, as quickly as it had come, the moment passed. His shoulders slumped in defeat, and he sank back into his chair, the fight draining from his body. "Well played, Lorraine," he muttered, a twisted smile curling his lips. "Well played indeed." As security swept in to escort him away, I caught Elise's eye from across the room. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her expression a heartbreaking mix of anguish and relief. In that moment, I knew the hard road to healing lay ahead. But as Derek's scathing glare bore into me one last time, I felt an odd sense of peace wash over me. The battle had been won, even if the war had exacted a heavy toll. Come what may, I would face it head-on, my daughter by my side. Derek Winslow was gone, but the fight for my family's future had only just begun. The days following Derek's dramatic ousting were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers, accountants, and investigators swarmed the office, meticulously untangling the intricate web of deceit he had woven. Meetings stretched late into the night as we grappled with the full extent of his misdeeds, the company teetering on the brink of financial ruin. Through it all, Elise remained a stoic presence by my side, her unwavering support a beacon of strength in the eye of the storm. Yet I could see the toll it was taking on her, the sleepless nights, the occasional vacant stare when she thought no one was looking. "She's holding up better than I expected," Jenna murmured one evening as we pored over the latest stack of financial reports. I followed her gaze to where Elise sat hunched over her laptop, her brow furrowed in concentration. "For now, perhaps. But this is just the calm before the storm." As if on cue, the office door burst open, and Derek's lawyer, a slimy character named Roth, blustered in, his face flushed with indignation. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, slamming his briefcase onto the nearest desk. "My client has been subjected to unlawful persecution and character assassination." Jenna arched a perfectly sculpted brow, her expression one of bored indifference. "Your client is facing multiple felony charges, Roth. I'd say he's getting off easy." Roth opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off with a sharp wave of my hand. "Enough. We're not here to entertain your theatrics. State your business or show yourself out." His beady eyes narrowed, but he seemed to think better of further antagonizing us. "Very well. My client is prepared to offer a plea deal in exchange for leniency." A derisive snort escaped Jenna's lips. "And why, pray tell, would we entertain such a ludicrous proposition?" "Because," Roth sneered, "my client has information that could prove detrimental to certain parties involved in his downfall." The implication hung heavy in the air, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Of course, the snake would try to slither his way out of the noose, even if it meant dragging others down with him. Elise had gone rigid at her workstation, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the desk. "He's bluffing," she murmured, her voice laced with a desperation that belied her words. Roth's gaze shifted to her, his lips curling into a predatory smile. "Am I, though? Your dear husband has a knack for uncovering secrets, even those buried deepest in the family closet." A tense silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the faint ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Jenna broke the stillness, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "Get out." Roth's eyes widened in mock surprise. You're not even going to hear me out? Who knows what skeletons Mr. Winslow might have unearthed in his quest for? I said, get out! Jenna was on her feet now, her finger jabbing the air mere inches from Roth's pallid face. Before I have you forcibly removed from the premises. For a moment it seemed he might press his luck, but something in Jenna's steely gaze must have given him pause. With a disdainful sniff, he snatched up his briefcase and turned on his heel, muttering curses under his breath as he stormed out. The office descended into a heavy silence, the weight of Roth's thinly veiled threats hanging over us like a dark cloud. Elise's shoulders trembled, and I moved to her side, enveloping her in a fierce embrace. "It'll be all right, sweetheart," I murmured, stroking her hair. "That snake has no venom left to strike with." Yet even as the words left my lips, a tendril of doubt snaked its way into my heart. Derek was a master manipulator, and if there was one thing I'd learned, it was never to underestimate his capacity for cruelty. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. The months that followed Derek's downfall were a whirlwind of legal battles and painstaking reconstruction. As the dust settled, the true extent of his betrayal became painfully clear. The company teetered on the brink of financial ruin, its coffers drained by his greed. Yet, through it all, Elise remained a steadfast presence by my side, her resilience a constant source of strength. Together, we pored over financial records, negotiated with creditors, and laid the groundwork for a fresh start, a future untainted by Derek's poisonous influence. "I can't believe he had the audacity to threaten us like that," Elise muttered one evening as we pored over the latest batch of legal documents. I glanced up from the stack of papers, my lips pressed into a grim line. That's just who Derek is, a snake who'll strike at anyone foolish enough to get in his way. Well, he miscalculated this time. There was a steely glint in her eye, a newfound resolve that made my heart swell with pride. We're not going to let him slither back into our lives. As if on cue, Jenna breezed into the room, her hair tousled and a triumphant grin playing across her lips. "Ladies, I come bearing good news." She brandished a thick manila envelope, letting it fall onto the desk with a dull thud. "Derek's plea deal has been finalized. He's looking at a hefty prison sentence, plus financial restitution to the company." A collective sigh of relief escaped our lips, the weight of months of uncertainty finally lifting from our shoulders. Elise's smile was radiant, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. "It's really over," she breathed, her voice tinged with disbelief. Jenna's gaze softened as she regarded us both. "Not quite. There's still the matter of rebuilding and moving forward." Her words hung in the air, a sobering reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. For so long, our sole focus had been on excising Derek's cancer from our lives. Now we faced the daunting task of healing the wounds he had inflicted, of reclaiming what was rightfully ours. Yet as I looked around the office, the very heart of my late husband's legacy, I felt a renewed sense of determination coursing through my veins. This was our chance, our opportunity to rise from the ashes and forge a brighter future. "You're right, Jenna," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "It's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work." The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity, as Elise and I threw ourselves into the task of rebuilding. We restructured departments, negotiated new contracts, and implemented stricter financial controls, all in an effort to safeguard against any future threats. Through it all, I marveled at the woman my daughter had become, strong, resilient, and fiercely loyal. The shadows of Derek's betrayal still lingered in her eyes, but they were overshadowed by a newfound sense of purpose, a determination to forge her own path. As the sun set on our first day of renewed operations, Elise and I lingered in the empty office, basking in the quiet sense of accomplishment. "Can you believe it, Mom?" she murmured, her gaze sweeping over the familiar surroundings. "We actually did it." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Of course we did, sweetheart. We're Robertson women, tough as nails and twice as stubborn." Her musical laughter filled the air, and in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united in our strength and resilience. As the last rays of daylight faded, casting long shadows across the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet nostalgia. So much had changed, so many battles fought and won. Yet in the end, it all came back to this: my family, my legacy, and the unwavering bond that held us together. Derek might have tried to tear us apart, but in doing so, he had only made us stronger. His poisonous influence was but a distant memory, a cautionary tale of what happens when greed and ambition consume a soul. As for us, well, we had a future to forge. One built on the foundations of love, loyalty, and an unbreakable spirit. And this time, nothing and no one would stand in our way. The tension in the dining room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I sat across from Harlan, my estranged husband, trying to keep my emotions in check as he droned on about his grand plans. "This luxury rehab center is going to put our little town on the map," he proclaimed, that slimy grin plastered across his face. "I've got investors lining up to be a part of it." My hands clenched under the table. Of course, his big idea involved lining his own pockets, not caring whose lives he disrupted in the process. "But Harlan," I interjected, struggling to remain calm, "that farmhouse has been in my family for generations. My parents' whole lives were spent tending to that land. You can't just tear it down." Dax and Ivy, my teenage kids, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was the kind of drama no child should have to witness between their parents, but Harlan seemed oblivious to their discomfort. Harlan scoffed, fixing me with that conniving glare that made my skin crawl. "Your parents' legacy?" he spat. "More like a dilapidated money pit holding us back. I've got the chance to finally do something worthwhile with that property." My blood boiled at his cavalier dismissal of everything that house represented to me. My childhood, my roots, my parents' life's work. All he could see was dollar signs. "It's not just about money," I exploded, slamming my palm on the table. Dax and Ivy jumped in their seats. "That farmhouse is our family heritage. It means something." "Yeah?" Harlan's lips curled into a sneer. "Well, it's my name on the deed, which means I get to make the calls around here. This rehab center is happening whether you like it or not." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. When had the man I married become such a self-absorbed, greedy bastard? I opened my mouth to protest further, but the dejected looks on Dax and Ivy's faces stopped me. As much as I wanted to continue fighting, I didn't want to put them through any more of this toxic drama tonight. I pushed back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "You know what, Harlan? Do whatever you want, but don't expect any support from me on this." Snatching up my purse, I stormed out of the dining room, the muffled sound of Harlan's laughter echoing behind me. My fists clenched at my sides as I fought back angry tears. He thought he had won this battle, but he was gravely mistaken. That old farmhouse represented everything my parents had built through decades of backbreaking work: the roots, the memories, the soul of our family. I wouldn't stand by and let Harlan's greed destroy it all in the name of profiting off people's suffering. Not without one hell of a fight. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Harlan was being uncharacteristically low-key, no doubt trying to avoid another bloody-owning match after our disastrous dinner. But I knew that smug snake was just biding his time, waiting for the right moment to slither forward with his precious rehab center plans. I wasn't about to just sit back and take it, though. If he thought he could bulldoze over my family's legacy so easily, he had another thing coming. It started with little things at first. Reevaluating our finances, I noticed irregularities, strange transfers, payments to unfamiliar companies. Confronting Harlan only led to him lashing out, accusing me of nagging and not trusting him. "It's basic business dealings, Alara. Not that you'd understand anything about building an empire." Those words stung, but I tried not to let it show. "This has nothing to do with trust, Harlan. I'm simply asking where our money is going." He brushed me off with a demeaning chortle. "Don't worry that pretty little head of yours. Just let me handle things, okay, dear?" The way he always talked down to me, treating me like a clueless child rather than his wife, it made my blood boil. But I knew pushing further would only lead to another explosive argument, so I bottled up my anger. For now. Then came the night I overheard Harlan's conversation with his sleazeball buddy Travis. I'll never forget the smugness in his tone as he bragged about bleeding me dry. "Once I've transferred the deed over solely to my name, Alara won't be able to do a damn thing. That little nuisance will be out of the picture for good." My heart stopped. He was planning on cutting me out completely, leaving me with nothing while he tore down my parents' legacy to build his tacky rehab palace. In that moment, any shed of respect or love I'd had left for Harlan evaporated. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. He wasn't just being greedy and inconsiderate, he was being malicious and cruel. Using our marriage vows as a weapon to steal from me and erase everything my family had built. I wanted nothing more than to burst into that room and unleash the fury building up inside me. To scream, to rage, to make him feel 1 ounce of the hurt he was inflicting on me. But I didn't. As the weight of Harlan's betrayal threatened to crush me, a strange calmness washed over me instead. Screaming would only give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten under my skin. No, I would be strong. I would be smart. If he wanted to wage war, then war was what he'd get. Quietly, I retreated back down the hall before either of those snakes could spot me eavesdropping. They thought they were so clever, but they had no idea what was coming for them. A faint smile played across my lips as their chortling laughter echoed behind me. In that moment, I made a vow to myself. Using every ounce of my intelligence and determination, I would take that smug snake Harlan down. He wanted to play dirty? I'd bury him. The next morning, I called a family meeting with Dax and Ivy. It was time to lay everything out on the table and bring them into the fight. "Your father has been lying to us," I stated bluntly as we gathered in the living room. "He's been secretly plotting to take full control of the farmhouse property." Ivy's eyes widened in shock, but Dax just frowned and nodded slowly. I knew something shady was going on. I overheard him on the phone the other night arguing about handling the Alara situation. My heart clenched hearing my own name being treated like a mere obstacle to be overcome. Harlan's deceit cut deeper than I could have imagined. He's aiming to cut me out completely so he can demolish the farmhouse for his rehab center ambitions. Without any legal claim, there's nothing I can do to stop him. Dax slammed his fist on the couch cushion. "That lying bastard! After everything you sacrificed for this family while he was off chasing get-rich-quick schemes, he doesn't deserve." He trailed off, anger causing his voice to shake. "We can't let him get away with this," Ivy stated firmly, conviction burning in her eyes. "Mom, that farmhouse is your heritage. Grandma and Grandpa's life was in those lands. We have to protect it." Hearing the determination in my daughter's voice, I felt a surge of pride mix with the simmering fury towards Harlan. She may have been young, but Ivy understood the importance of not letting our family history be erased. "You're absolutely right," I declared, straightening my back. "Which is why I need both of you on board with taking Harlan down. We're going to expose every last one of his underhanded tactics." Dax raised an eyebrow skeptically. "And just how do you plan on doing that? Pretty sure dear old Dad has his shady business dealings locked up tighter than Fort Knox." A grim smile crossed my lips. "Let's just say I have some tricks up my sleeve, too. Starting with carefully documenting every inconsistency I find in our finances, no matter how small. Harlan always was sloppy about covering his tracks completely." I proceeded to lay out the start of my plan, meticulously building an evidence trail of Harlan's financial manipulation, from questionable payments and transfers to the shady characters he was courting as rehab center investors. Dax was put in charge of thoroughly combing through all communication records, emails, texts, phone calls, looking for any trace of Harlan's deceitful intentions and dealings. Ivy, ever the tech genius, would backtrack all digital money movements to ensure we caught every inconsistency. With her skills, even Harlan's feeble efforts at coding expenses wouldn't be able to hide from us. As we finalized assigning roles and responsibilities, a new sense of determination filled the room. Harlan had clearly underestimated just how ferociously we would fight to take him down. Big mistake. "This is going to be one hell of a battle," Dax mused grimly. I met his gaze, letting the full force of my resolve burn through. "Then it's a good thing he messed with the wrong family. Harlan wanted a war. He'll get one he never saw coming. With a united front, we shook on our pact. There would be no more holding back. Harlan had awoken a vengeful force he couldn't possibly comprehend. Everything he'd worked towards was about to unravel by his own narcissistic greed. Let the games begin. A few days later, I finally worked up the nerve to confront Harlan directly about his betrayal. I'd spent too many nights stewing in anger, imagining all the ways I could rip him a new one. But I needed to play this confrontation carefully if I wanted to catch him off guard. "Harlan, we need to talk," I stated firmly as I entered the den, jaw clenched in determination. He barely looked up from his laptop, offering a dismissive grunt. "What is it now, Alara? I'm kind of busy here." I could feel my temper already starting to flare at his indifference, but I took a steadying breath. "Don't take the bait. Not yet." "Too busy to discuss your secret dealings to cut me out of the farmhouse deed?" I asked, carefully watching his expression. That seemed to finally get his attention. Harlan's head snapped up, his brow furrowing in that familiar look of faux innocence he used when caught in a lie. "What are you talking about? There are no secret dealings." I leveled him with a cold stare. "Don't play dumb with me, Harlan. I know all about your pathetic schemes to take full control of my family's property behind my back." For a split second, I saw a flicker of panic flash across his features before the mask of indignation slid back into place. "Alara, you're being completely irrational right now." "Can it, Harlan?" My composure finally snapped as I slammed my palms on the desk, causing him to flinch back in his chair. "I know you've been manipulating the finances, chatting up shady investors, all so you can demolish that farmhouse for your precious little vanity rehab project." Harlan opened his mouth, no doubt to spew more lies and feeble justifications. But I wasn't having any of it, not this time. "You make me sick," I snarled, all the rage and anguish I'd been bottling up finally boiling over. Planning to tear down a piece of my family's legacy all along, lying to my face every step of the way. "You're nothing but a selfish, immoral snake." He recoiled slightly at the venom in my words, then quickly straightened as that cocky, condescending sneer spread across his lips. Well, looks like the little woman has finally grown some claws. But you don't scare me, Alara. Not even close." Despite the bravado, I could detect a slight quiver of uncertainty in his voice. Good, he should be worried. "You think you've got everything all figured out, don't you?" Harlan leaned back with a contemptuous chuckle. "Newsflash, princess. I don't need your approval or permission to do anything with that property. It's mine, fair and square." My blood boiled at his arrogance. Did he really think underhanded manipulation made his claim fair? But before I could retort, he was leaning towards me with that soulless grin that made my skin crawl. "In fact, you're the one who's about to get a rude wake-up call," he promised in a low, silky tone. "I've got everything legally locked up tighter than a drum. By the time I'm through, you're going to be the one left with nothing while I build my empire." We were practically nose to nose now, his putrid breath washing over me as he hissed out the final threat. "You think you can take me on, sweetheart? By all means, try. But don't be surprised when I bury you along with your precious little memories. It's going to be a bloodbath, and I'm going to enjoy every second of watching you lose everything." Hatred burned in my chest, barely contained rage roiling within me at his vicious, vindictive words. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to unleash the full force of my fury upon this wretched, soulless man I'd once loved. But I didn't. Slowly, I straightened up and took a step back, returning his venom-filled glare with a calm, level look. "You seem pretty confident, don't you, Harlan?" I stated, my voice dangerously even. "We'll see how long that smug smile lasts once the truth about your shady dealings comes to light. You wanted a war? You're going to get one." Giving him one final look of pure, undisguised disgust, I turned and strode from the den, my high heels clicking determinedly against the hardwood. Harlan may have thought he held all the cards, but he had hugely underestimated me. The game was on now, and I fully intended to be the last one standing when the dust cleared. After my explosive showdown with Harlan, I knew I needed to take our fight to the next level. As much as Dax and Ivy's support bolstered my determination, we couldn't take Harlan down alone. We needed reinforcements. First on my list was my best friend Alicia, a sharp-tongued lawyer who had been watching this whole saga unfold with disdain for my snake of a husband. As expected, she jumped at the chance to help take Harlan down a peg. "That scumbag has had this coming for a long time," Alicia said with relish when I looped her in on our scheme. "Just tell me what kind of legal roadblocks we need to throw his way." Her wolfish grin was one I'd seen many times before, usually right before she went for the jugular in court. Harlan wouldn't know what hit him once we sicked Alicia's legal prowess on his shoddy cover-ups. Next, I reached out to some of my oldest friends from my nursing days, Jacqueline, Maria, and Sandy. While we had drifted apart over the years due to work and raising families, they were still the most loyal, iron-willed women I knew. When I laid out the battle plan, how Harlan aimed to destroy my family legacy in his ruthless pursuit of profits, their reactions were awe-inspiring blend of outrage and grim determination. "Say no more, girl," Jacqueline stated, pulling me into a bear hug. "That bastard's not going to know what hit him when we're done rallying the troops." Sandy cracked her knuckles meaningfully. "I've been waiting years to give that smug prick a piece of my mind. Count me in." Maria simply nodded, her jaw set in a hard line. "Para la familia. Let's burn that cabron to the ground." With a fiercely loyal crew now assembled, the real planning began. We'd hit Harlan from every angle possible. Alicia laying the groundwork for our legal offensive, while Jacqueline and the others used their vast network of contacts in our small town to rally public opinion solidly against him. "Harlan may have his pockets lined with cash, but we've got the most powerful weapons of all, the truth and the will of the people," Alicia declared. "Once we expose every last one of his shady schemes, he won't be able to show his weaselly face in this town again." Over the next few days, the fight was taken to Harlan on all fronts. Damning documents and financial records detailing his fraud were anonymously leaked to the local press. Community meetings were organized to rally support for protecting my family's legacy at all costs against Harlan's ambitions. Scathing social media campaigns exposing what a con artist he truly was began spreading like wildfire. At the same time, Alicia was working every back door to halt permits and dispute property claims, throwing up every possible legal roadblock to Harlan's rehab center dreams, while we dug up more concrete evidence of his lies and manipulation. As the townsfolk turned decisively against Harlan and his partners started growing nervous over the mounting allegations, you could practically smell the desperation rolling off that weasel. He knew he was losing his grip on the situation, but was too proud and arrogant to gracefully admit defeat. Which was exactly what we wanted. The slimy rat backed into a corner, scrabbling for any advantage as we slowly tightened the vice around his schemes. Of course, the attacks and libelous claims started flying once Harlan realized what an impenetrable defense we had formed. Cries of modern-day witch hunt and embellished accusations that I had grifted money in retaliation were aimed at trying to sow seeds of doubts, but we stood united against the onslaught. Harlan could grasp at whatever pitiful straws of denial he wanted. In a matter of days, we had already dismantled most of his rehab center plans while simultaneously turning almost the entire town against him. "He's getting desperate," I noted to Dax and Ivy as news dropped of another one of Harlan's investors pulling out amidst the cloud of suspicion. "Getting sloppy, too." My lips curved into a thin, predatory smile. "Which means his defenses are finally cracking open for our killing strike. Watch closely, kids. This is how we draw the venom from a snake before going in for the kill." The battle was far from over, but the war had finally swung in our favor, and I was going to savor every well-deserved second of Harlan's downfall. It all came to a head at the community center meeting Alicia had organized. Creating a media spectacle was her specialty, and this was shaping up to be her magnum opus of public lashings. As I entered the packed auditorium that night, the stuffy air was thick with anticipation and accusation. All eyes turned towards me, hushed murmurs filling the space as I made my way to the front. The townspeople had gotten wind that explosive revelations about Harlan were coming, and you could feel the thirst for blood in the air. I wasn't alone, however. Dax, Ivy, Alicia, and my former nursing crew stood in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder, as we ascended the stage. We were bathed in the harsh spotlight when I finally stepped up to the podium, casting shadows that danced ominously behind us. Without preamble, I launched right into my opening salvo. "Good evening, everyone. I wish I could say I gathered you all here tonight under better circumstances, but the situation we are facing is one of great consequence." My eyes swept the crowd, taking in the rapt expressions locked onto me, before continuing in a voice that carried firmly to the rafters. Many of you are already aware of my husband Harlan's ambitions to demolish my family's ancestral farmhouse in order to build a luxury rehabilitation center. I paused, letting the weight of that statement hang in the air as cries of outrage rippled through the crowd. Seizing the momentum, I pressed on, voice rising with conviction. What you may not know are the depths of deceit, fraud, and manipulation Harlan stooped to in order to make this happen. Evidence we have uncovered shows a long pattern of shady dealings, underhanded tactics, and blatant lies, all in the name of lining his pockets at the expense of our community and my family's heritage. A hush fell over the auditorium as I reached into my blazer pocket and extracted a thick manila folder, holding it aloft for all to see. In here are documents, financial records, communication trails, all detailing Harlan's litany of moral and potentially criminal transgressions, from money laundering and backroom deals with known fraudsters, to pretending to be the sole owner of the property while actively working to cut me out and dissolve my legal claim. Gasps and murmurs exploded around the auditorium, shock and disdain on every face. I pressed my advantage, pitching my voice to be heard over the din. This man is a charlatan and a criminal who has lied, deceived, and undermined every step of the way in his blind greed. Are we going to let his toxicity ravage the very soul of our community while he gets away with it? No. The crowd roared as one, a deafening chorus of outrage. From the side of the stage, I saw Harlan finally stumble in, eyes wild and face flushed. He had clearly caught wind of our little truth rally and come to do damage control. Too little, far too late. "You lying bitch," he snarled as realization dawned, fight eyes bulging. "You can't do this. I'll bury you for this, I swear." "Save it, Snake." Alicia's voice cut through the commotion like a whip crack as she strode forward, holding up a hand to silence the angry mob. "We've got you dead to rights on a laundry list of charges. From shady business dealings to criminal fraud, you're going to be lucky if you don't end up in prison after this is through." Harlan looked around wildly, seeming to finally grasp just how tenuous his situation had become. I watched with cold satisfaction as the blood drained from his face. "Give it up, Harlan," I stated, my voice dripping with contempt. "Your shit show of lies and deception is over. The jig is up. Everyone can see you for the duplicitous, bottom-feeding scumbag you truly are." His mouth worked uselessly for a moment before snarling, pointed a quivering finger at me. You'll regret this, Alara. You hear me? This isn't over by a long shot." But his threats rang hollow, drowned out by a thunderous wave of boos and jeers cascading from the enraged townsfolk. As security finally arrived to escort the ranting Harlan away, I stood tall and fixed him with a look of pure, undisguised loathing. I had dismantled every last one of his lies and defenses. For the first time, he was utterly defenseless against the consequences of his villainy, and I was going to savor every damn second of his well-deserved downfall. After the explosive community meeting, Harlan's world came crashing down in spectacular fashion. You didn't need a crystal ball to see the karmic reckoning that was barreling towards that contemptible snake. Within days, the avalanche of press coverage exposing his vast array of fraud and deception caused a catastrophic domino effect. Investors and business partners scattered like roaches, suspending dealings and distancing themselves from the deepening pit of scandal. Banks froze his assets and lines of credit pending multiple investigations. The rehab center project laid in ruins, all permits revoked amidst the firestorm. And that was just the financial devastation. As the lurid allegations piled up, everything from laundering money for offshore drug cartels to funneling bribes through phony construction funds, the legal walls closed in with terrifying swiftness. Furious investors filed a wave of lawsuits demanding Harlan's head, while the district attorney's office secured a grand jury indictment on nearly 24 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and more. You could practically smell the stench of desperation emanating from Harlan as it all unraveled before his eyes, thanks to his own rampant arrogance and greed. "You'll pay for this, Alara," he'd frequently screech at me in chilling displays of rage, spittle flying. "You'll rue the day you started this war. I'll make sure you end up destitute and alone, living in that piece of crap farmhouse." All I could do was sneer back at his pathetic flailings, enjoying every agonizing second of his meltdown. "Is that so?" I'd reply calmly, basking in his manic fury. Last I checked, I'm the one who still has custody of the kids, financial security, and the deed to that crap farmhouse you were ready to demolish. You, on the other hand. I leaned back, eyeing his disheveled, unraveling appearance. Well, you seem to be doing a fine job of self-destructing all on your own. I'd leave him to stew in his own toxic cesspool of hatred while I moved full steam ahead with reclaiming my family legacy. With Harlan's nefarious ambitions now a smoldering wreckage, it was full steam ahead on restoring the precious farmhouse to its former glory, to honor my parents' memory and provide a revitalizing community gathering place. Of course, Harlan tried every desperate gambit imaginable to regain some semblance of leverage or control. Mostly pathetic smear tactics and attempts to turn Dax and Ivy against me through vile manipulation. But his venom had lost its bite. The kids saw him for the soulless, morally bankrupt specimen he truly was. In the end, his towering ego crippled him when it came time to negotiate custody and divorce terms. While my team played hardball to rightfully secure nearly everything, Harlan was too poisoned by spite to make any logical capitulations. He pathetically tried to contest Alicia's ironclad case for how much punishment he deserved, ranting and raving about unfair treatment as each ruling systematically stripped him of money, property, and professional clout. I'd be lying if I said I didn't take immense satisfaction in watching that surly worm finally receive his comeuppance. It was nothing less than he deserved after so selfishly trying to burn down my family's treasured history in his warpath of greed and vanity. As for me, I rebounded splendidly from the wreckage Harlan left behind. Thanks to the groundswell of local support and Alicia's legal mastery, my claim to the farmhouse was solidified while my nursing credentials remained unblemished. The perfect foundation on which to execute my new vision for the revered property. With the community's help, the farmhouse underwent a transformation into a rustic but vibrant wellness center, offering holistic services, community events, and opportunities for local youth to connect with their rural heritage. A living embodiment of the values my parents instilled in me, allowing their hard-won legacy to be reborn into something even more meaningful. As for Harlan, his fall from grace was as brutal as it was deserved. The walls finally closed in with an 18-year prison sentence after his high-profile trial laid bare the full extent of his sociopathic depravity. His professional reputation was left in permanent ruin, reduced to a cautionary tale. One final delicious bit of karma? Dax and Ivy leveled him with chilling silence when he tried to grovel for their sympathies with smarmy calls from prison, the once infallible master manipulator unable to wriggle his way back into their good graces. After everything, that smug, soulless charlatan got exactly what he deserved, a life torn asunder by his own corrosive deceptions and greed. While I had risen from the rubble he tried to leave me in, creating new hopes and dreams from the foundations he aimed to destroy. Perhaps there was such a thing as justice and karma in this world, after all. All it took was the unstoppable force of a mother's love, fueled by the righteous determination to protect her family's sacred legacy. It was a crisp autumn morning when we held the grand reopening ceremony for the revitalized farmhouse, now christened Willow Creek Wellness Center. Though Harlan's scorched earth campaign had left the property in desperate need of repairs and renovations, we had persevered to breathe new life into my family's cherished legacy. As I stepped up to the podium that day, surrounded by the beaming faces of the townspeople who had rallied behind me, I couldn't help but feel immense pride at what we had achieved together. This wasn't just a new chapter, but a hard-won resurrection from the ashes of Harlan's selfish ambition. To all of you here today, words can't express how grateful I am for your support over these past months, I began, my voice wavering slightly with emotion. When faced with the very real threat of seeing this farmhouse, a piece of my family's heart and soul, torn asunder in the name of greed, you stood united. You stood for the importance of preserving our community's history and values. I paused, feeling Dax and Ivy's reassuring presence beside me as the crowd cheered their affirmation. In that moment, the nightmare of Harlan's betrayal felt like a distant specter, no longer able to diminish this hard-fought victory. Thanks to your resilience and refusal to let corporate excess trample on what makes this town great, we have reclaimed this invaluable space, I continued, fresh conviction rising in my voice. No longer will it serve as a monument to one man's ego, but as a place of healing, of unity, of rediscovering our roots. Willow Creek will be our community's lighthouse, a sanctuary where we can reconnect with ourselves, our neighbors, and the unbreakable threads that have bound us together for generations. More roars of approval and thunderous applause. Despite Harlan throwing everything he had at trying to divide and conquer us, his scorched earth tactics had only galvanized the community's strength and resolve. Karma indeed was a harsh mistress. After the ribbon cutting, I took time to greet and personally thank as many well-wishers as possible. From Alicia, whose legal prowess had been invaluable, to Jacqueline and my other nurses-turned-warriors on the front lines, so many rallied to this cause when Harlan thought he could steamroll right over my family's legacy. Speaking of that wretched snake, I couldn't help but smirk thinking about how he was spending this beautiful day. Rotting in a dingy cell, I'd wager, still trying in vain to wrap his mind around how I'd outmaneuvered him at every single turn. Let him stew and boil over with hatred. I had emerged from his smear campaign completely vindicated, stronger than ever before. And surrounding me now was a living, breathing symbol of that, the culmination of my parents' lifelong efforts and my own perseverance in the face of cruelty. He never stood a chance against you, did he? I turned to see Dax watching me with an odd look of contemplation, perhaps sensing where my mind had drifted. Before I could reply, Ivy sidled up and playfully nudged her brother. "Are you kidding? I figured Mom would bury that jackass from the moment his stupid scheme came to light." "Oh, ye of little faith," I chuckled, pulling them both into a tight embrace. To be fair, even I wasn't certain I had the fortitude at first to wage this war. But when I saw the two of you standing by me without hesitation, everything became clear. I pulled back, holding them at arm's length as memories of those initial dark days flashed in my mind's eye. When Harlan's true nature was laid bare, when he tried to strip me of my identity and destroy everything our family holds dear, that was when I knew this fight was about so much more than just a property deed. It was about not letting that soulless parasite kill the spirit and legacy your grandparents bestowed on me. Dax and Ivy exchanged knowing looks, seeming to gain a deeper understanding of the cataclysmic forces that had been unleashed. "I may have dealt the decisive blows," I continued solemnly, "but it was our united front as a family that gave me the strength and determination to dismantle his poisonous schemes piece by piece. Without you two by my side, righting Harlan's wrongs may have broken me." For a long moment we stood in silence, a tear glistening at the corner of my eye as I absorbed the symbolic weight of the sprawling farmhouse campus surrounding us. It would never again serve as a monument to greed, consumed by one man's vanity. No, this place had been reborn, a living, breathing embodiment of the values that could never be erased, no matter how viciously they were attacked. It stood as testament to the unbreakable endurance of family, of truth, and of carving our own legacies in defiance of those who tried to steal them away. And I couldn't have asked for a greater triumph to call my own. I stared at the text on Trent's phone, my heart pounding as the words burned into my mind. "I love it when you call me that. Can't wait for tomorrow." It was clearly not meant for me. We were supposed to be celebrating my big promotion over dinner, but now everything felt like a lie. Trent must have noticed the look on my face because he quickly tried to grab his phone back. "Mallory, it's not what you think," he stammered, his eyes wide with panic. I felt sick to my stomach, like I'd been punched in the gut. How could he do this to me? To us? After everything we'd been through together? Trent's sister Cassandra looked bewildered, glancing between us. "What's going on?" Before Trent could make up some lame excuse, I stood up abruptly, the fancy restaurant seeming to spin around me. "We're leaving. Now." The drive back to our apartment was agonizingly silent. I kept replaying that damn text over and over, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. When we got inside, I finally exploded. "Who is she?" I demanded, rounding on Trent. "How long has this been going on?" He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "Don't you dare lie to me." Trent's shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's been a few months. I'm so sorry, Mallory." A few months. While we'd been planning our wedding, looking at venues, he'd been sneaking around behind my back. Hot tears of anger and hurt streamed down my face. "I can't believe you," I choked out. "We're through." I stormed into the bedroom, slamming and locking the door behind me. I collapsed onto the bed, sobbing into the pillow until I had no tears left. That's when the anger truly set in, burning through me with white-hot intensity. Trent wanted to play these games? Fine. I would make him regret the day he ever betrayed me. This was not over, not by a long shot. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a burning desire for vengeance. Trent was still asleep on the couch when I emerged from the bedroom, looking pathetic and guilty even in his unconscious state. "Wake up," I snapped, startling him. He jerked awake, eyes widening as he took in my stony expression. "Mallory, I'm so—" "Save it," I cut him off coldly. "I don't want to hear any more of your lies and excuses." Trent swallowed hard, looking like a scolded child. Good. He should feel ashamed. "Who is she?" I demanded again. "I want to know everything." He hesitated, but one withering look from me made him crumble. "Her name is Jessica. We met at a work conference 6 months ago and—" He trailed off miserably. White-hot fury coursed through me at the thought of him carrying on an affair for half a year while I naively planned our future together. "Have you been using protection?" I asked through gritted teeth, realizing with horror that he could have brought home God knows what. Trent had the decency to look even more ashamed. "And no, I haven't." I felt dizzy with disgust and rage. This man I had loved, had trusted more than anyone, had lied to me, used me, disrespected me in the worst way. Something inside me hardened like steel. "Get out," I said in a low, dangerous voice. "What?" Trent looked stricken. "You heard me," I said coldly. "Get your stuff and get out of my apartment. We're done." He opened his mouth to protest, but I leveled him with a look that could cut glass. Shoulders slumping in defeat, Trent dragged himself to the bedroom to pack a bag. As I watched him slink out the door, I felt a dark sense of satisfaction take root in my heart. This was just the beginning. I would make Trent pay for what he'd done, no matter what it took. And by the time I was finished, his life would be in ruins. Over the next few days, I operated with cold, ruthless efficiency. I started by contacting a private investigator and giving them all the details about Trent's infidelity. I wanted every sordid detail of his affair exposed. Then I got to work gathering my own evidence. I dug through our old phone records, bank statements, anything that could reveal more about the depth of Trent's betrayal. With each new discovery, the flames of my fury burned hotter. Thankfully, I had an amazing support system in my friends. When I told them what that bastard had done, they were outraged on my behalf. "That piece of garbage!" Steph raged when I showed her the hotel receipts. "I'll kill him myself." "You're too good for that lying snake," Dana seethed, wrapping a supportive arm around me. "We'll make him pay, I promise." Their unconditional love and loyalty gave me strength during those dark days. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for all the women who had ever been cheated on and mistreated by selfish men like Trent. With my friend's help, I formulated a plan of attack. First, we would systematically dismantle Trent's professional life by leaking proof of his indiscretions to his boss and colleagues. Then, we'd take down his social status by revealing his true nature to his smarmy country club pals. Finally, I would deliver the killing blow by crushing his ego and leaving him a pariah. By the time I was done, Trent Holden would be less than a memory. The thought of destroying him brought me a vicious sense of satisfaction. Still, a small part of me felt a twinge of sadness for the man I had once loved. I quickly shoved those feelings aside. Trent had made his bed, and now he could lie in it. My friends noticed my dark mood and tried to lift my spirits. "Let's go out tonight," Monica suggested brightly. "Get your mind off of things." I managed a small smile, grateful for their efforts to cheer me up. "Sure, why not? I could use a distraction." As we headed to our favorite club that night, I caught my reflection in a storefront window. My eyes burned with a hardness I didn't recognize. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. Revenge wasn't just something I wanted. It was something I needed, like air. And I would stop at nothing until Trent's world lay in ashes around him. With the evidence gathered by the private investigator, I was locked and loaded. It was time to start taking Trent down, one piece at a time. First, I anonymously sent a file containing proof of his affair to his boss at the investment firm. Explicit photos, receipts for secret hotel trysts, the works. I made sure to include a polite note about how such indiscretions could open the company up to sexual harassment lawsuits. A few days later, the hammer dropped. Trent was called into an emergency meeting and unceremoniously suspended pending further investigation into his unethical behavior. When I caught wind of the news from Monica, who worked in the same building, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. That was just a taste of what was to come. Next, I turned my sights to dismantling Trent's social status. I may have been raised working class, but I knew how important keeping up appearances was to that smarmy country club crowd he ran with. I created an anonymous email account and sent graphic details of his affair to the board members of his snobby golf club. I even included a few choicely censored photos just to rub salt in the wound. Within a week, Trent had been asked to resign his membership after several decades. Rumor spread like wildfire amongst the cuckolded housewives who ran those upper-crust social circles. But I wasn't done yet. If I wanted to leave Trent well and truly broken, I needed to completely decimate his ego and reputation in our community. That opportunity came at the next meeting of our neighborhood beautification committee, of all places. I haunted those meetings like a ghost, half listening as Trent pompously held court while the other wives and I rolled our eyes. When he launched into another blustery diatribe about the import of maintaining community values, I couldn't stop myself. "Speaking of values," I said loudly, cutting him off, "I have something to share about our esteemed committee chairman." You could have heard a pin drop as all eyes swiveled towards me. Trent paled, realizing where this was going. "Trent here has been having an affair for months," I proclaimed, holding up a manila envelope. "With proof." The explosion of gasps and outcries was a beautiful cacophony to my ears. Trent frantically tried to deflect as I read out the lurid details, but it was too late. His polished veneer of respectability shattered into a million pieces that day, and as I watched him crumble under the weight of his exposed lies, I felt like a goddess of vengeance. The game was oh so deliciously afoot. The next phase of my plan required a more public approach. I decided to strike at the next major charity gala our social circle always attended. It was the perfect stage to completely undermine Trent's crumbling reputation. As I got ready that night, I could feel the excited energy thrumming through me. This was the moment I had been meticulously preparing for. With each swing of the metaphorical sword, I'd been slowly severing Trent's ties to this community. Tonight, I would go for the killing blow. When we arrived at the fancy venue, Trent tried to put on a brave face, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes as he scanned the crowd, realizing the damage I'd already done. His usual sycophants were giving him a wide berth, whispering behind raised hands. I swept through the room like royalty, head held high. A server offered me a glass of champagne, which I accepted with a regal nod. The bubbles danced on my tongue as I sipped slowly, savoring the moment. Eventually, it came time for the speeches. A hush fell over the ballroom as the host took the stage to thank everyone for their generous donations. Then, almost as an afterthought, he gestured for me to join him. "We'd also like to acknowledge Valerie Greaves tonight," the host said as I ascended the steps, "for her outstanding leadership and community service over the past year." A smattering of polite applause broke out, but I could feel the energy in the room shift as people realized I was about to speak. Trent looked almost gray as our eyes locked. "Thank you all," I began, my voice ringing with poise and confidence. "It's truly an honor to give back to our community in whatever way I can." I paused, letting that magnanimous statement hang in the air for a beat. Then I went for the jugular. "Unfortunately, not everyone here tonight shares those same values of honor, integrity, and commitment. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone watched with bated breath, and I could sense Trent's panic rising. Some put on a good show," I continued, holding his stricken gaze. "But behind closed doors, they lie, cheat, and betray the very principles this community was built on." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd as people put two and two together. Trent looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. "Those are not my values," I said firmly, "and they should not be anyone's values if we want to create a society of trust and respect." The applause that followed was thunderous. I gracefully rejoined my table, leaving Trent to stew in humiliation. He tried to storm out, but another attendee blocked his way, loudly condemning his deplorable behavior. As the night raged on, I basked in the triumph of watching my revenge play out so perfectly. Trent deserved every ounce of scorn and embarrassment headed his way, and I was just getting started. After the charity gala, it was like a dam had burst. The evidence of Trent's misdeeds spread through our social circles like wildfire, burning everything in its path. Within days, he was indefinitely suspended from his job at the investment firm, pending further investigation into the mounting allegations of misconduct. His fair-weather friends at the country club didn't even pretend to be subtle. Trent's membership was permanently revoked. Meanwhile, I reveled in my newfound infamy, catching snippets of gossip everywhere I went. Did you hear what that snake Trent did? Mallory is such a badass for taking him down like that. With each new story of Trent's downfall, I felt more powerful, more vindicated. This was justice being served. Of course, he tried to confront me to do damage control. Trent showed up at my door one night, eyes blazing with impotent rage. "What have you done?" He snarled as I calmly opened the door. "You've ruined my entire life." I simply raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "I'm just revealing the truth about who you really are. Everything you're going through is nobody's fault but your own." Trent's face contorted with anger, and he took a step forward, fists clenched. An empty threat. We both knew he didn't have the guts to actually hit me. "This isn't over," he spat. "I'll make you pay for this, you vindictive I'd watch your tone if I were you." I cut him off coldly. "Your life is already in tatters thanks to your own despicable actions. Don't make it worse for yourself." With that, I shut the door in his stunned face, not even giving him the satisfaction of a reaction. Let him stew in the mess of his own creation for a while. In the coming weeks, the noose only tightened around Trent's neck. Gripped by morbid curiosity, I started collecting the articles and social media posts that detailed his spectacular fall from grace. There was the scathing editorial from the local paper, dressing him down as a modern-day cad, the deluge of Facebook and Twitter comments from former associates and friends, calling him every insult under the sun. His promising career was in ashes, his reputation forever stained. And to think, this was all just the beginning of what I had planned for him. As the public condemnation crescendoed, Trent started looking gray and haggard, like the life was being drained from him. Good. I wanted him to suffer, to feel even a fraction of the anguish and humiliation he'd put me through. When our mutual friend Monica invited us both to her housewarming party, I knew it was the perfect chance to twist the knife even deeper. I arrived early, greeting the other guests with my usual poise as Trent sulked in the corner, a pariah. This was going to be fun. The housewarming party was in full swing when Trent finally showed his face. As soon as he walked through the door, the atmosphere chilled. People stopped mid-conversation to gawk at the man who had become a public disgrace. Trent's eyes frantically scanned the crowd until they landed on me, holding court by the bar. A snarl twisted his features as he stalked over. "You just can't let this go, can you?" he hissed under his breath. "You've already taken everything from me. What more could you possibly want?" I simply smiled thinly and took a sip of my drink. "The truth will come out sooner or later, Trent. I'm just expediting the process." He opened his mouth to retort, but a sudden lull in the chatter made us both freeze. All eyes had turned towards us with undisguised interest. Seizing the moment, Trent puffed out his chest and raised his voice for all to hear. "Listen, everyone, I know there's been a lot of unfair rumors circulating about me recently, but I can assure you, they're just that, vicious lies perpetuated by a vengeful ex." A disbelieving murmur rippled through the crowd. Trent wasn't deterred, clearly hoping to sway the audience to his side through bluster alone. "Mallory is simply lashing out because she couldn't handle the end of our relationship like a mature adult. This campaign of defamation is nothing more than the unhinged actions of a woman scorned." My hand tightened around my glass as I felt the weight of dozens of accusing stares. How dare he try to play the victim? To rewrite the narrative as if he wasn't a lying, cheating snake? "Is that so?" A cool voice rang out from the back of the room. We all turned to see Monica pushing through the throng of onlookers, a familiar manila envelope clutched in her hand. Oh no, she wouldn't, would she? Trent seemed to realize the same thing, his face draining of color. "Monica, whatever you think you know." "Save it, Trent," she said flatly, joining me at the center of the makeshift arena. "I have proof right here of everything. Bank statements showing your money trail to hotels and apartments for your little trysts, texts and emails between you and your mistress, even photos and video if anyone needs further convincing." A shocked silence fell over the party as Monica flipped open the envelope, letting a few incriminating photos spill out onto the counter. Up-close shots of Trent in compromising positions with his lover, leaving no doubt as to their indecent activities. "You make me sick," Monica snarled at the shell-shocked Trent, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "How could you do this to Mallory, to all of us who considered you a friend?" She jabbed an accusing finger at the graphic evidence. "This is who you are, Trent. A liar, a cheater, a total embarrassment to anyone who ever trusted you. Mallory is done letting you get away with your lies and deceptions." A smattering of disgusted murmurs echoed through the crowd as they finally saw Trent for the vile snake he truly was. He looked around wildly, searching for any scrap of support or sympathy, but finding only scorn and revulsion. Shoulders slumped in defeat, Trent turned and fled the party without another word, disappearing into the night from which there would be no redemption. I watched him go with a mixture of pity and vicious satisfaction. The once proud man was now a hated pariah, and he had no one to blame but himself. Turning to Monica with a grateful smile, I pulled her into a fierce hug. "Thank you," I murmured, fighting back joyful tears. "For everything." This was the end of Trent Holden, and I had never felt more vindicated or powerful in my life. A few months later, I could finally breathe again. The cloud of anger and obsession that had consumed me after Trent's betrayal had lifted, allowing the sun to peek through once more. As I settled into my swanky new corner office at work, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. My hard work and perseverance had paid off. I'd been promoted to senior marketing director in the wake of the old director's abrupt resignation. Rumor was the scandal surrounding his colleague Trent had been the final straw that broke the company's tolerance for unethical behavior. I smiled wryly, knowing I had played more than a small role in that chain of events. These days, Trent's name was like a dirty word around town. He'd become a virtual pariah, unable to show his face without getting pelted with disgusted looks and whispers. Some nights when I was feeling nostalgic, I'd scroll through the countless think pieces and social media posts dissecting his downfall, my lips curling into a satisfied smirk each time. Entitled creep finally gets what he deserves. Massachusetts man revealed as lying, cheating scumbag. My personal favorite. Mythological furies have nothing on this scorned woman's wrath. The audacity of my revenge plot had become stuff of urban legend in certain circles. I didn't mind. Let the cautionary tale of what happened to Trent Holden serve as a warning for any other unfaithful creeps out there. My friends, of course, remained loyal supporters through it all. We'd crack open a bottle of cheap white wine and raise sarcastic toasts to Trent's increasing misery, to the disgraced dog finally being neutered, to Burns so sick they're going to need medical attention. Those nights filled with raucous laughter and female solidarity made the darkness of those first few weeks feel like a lifetime ago. I had found my voice, my power, and I refused to let any man make me a victim again. Still, there was one last bit of unfinished business with my wretched ex. One night, my phone pinged with a number I didn't recognize. "Mallory, it's me. I know you probably never want to speak to me again, but I need to see you, to apologize properly, face to face, for all the pain I caused you. Please, give me a chance to make things right." I stared at the message, letting the words wash over me. Part of me was tempted to meet him, if only to savor the sight of how far he'd fallen. The once cocky, arrogant Trent brought to his knees, begging for forgiveness he'd never deserve. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew there was no point in dredging up the past any longer, that Trent and all his lies and betrayals belonged to another lifetime that I had outgrown. With a decisive swipe, I deleted the message and blocked the number. That chapter of my life was over. Looking around my sleek new apartment with its stunning views, I felt a surge of liberation and excitement for the future. I was a new woman, forging her own story from the ashes of heartbreak and vengeance. And this time it would be one built on truth, on strength, on respect for myself above all others. Bring it on, world. I was more than ready. It was the muffled thuds that woke me from my restless slumber. Disoriented, I blinked at the blinking red numbers on my nightstand. 2:17 a.m. The noise persisted, followed by what sounded like hurried footsteps. Adrenaline surged through my body as I grabbed my phone, ready to call the cops. Before I could dial, a frantic knocking erupted from my front door. "Arya, are you all right? Open up." It was Mr. Halgren, my elderly neighbor from across the hall. Clutching my robe tightly, I rushed to the door and peered through the peephole. His face was etched with concern. "What's going on?" I asked, unlocking the door. "I heard strange noises from your brother's place next door," he said, his voice quivering. "It sounded like someone was breaking in." My stomach knotted at the mention of my estranged brother, Elric. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the ugly inheritance dispute after our parents' tragic deaths. But the mere thought of him rekindled the bitterness that still simmered inside me. Pushing those feelings aside, I followed Mr. Halgren down the dimly lit hallway. As we approached Elric's apartment, an eerie silence filled the air. I peered through the crack of his partially open door and gasped. The place was ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers emptied, and belongings strewn across the floor. My heart raced as I instinctively clutched Mr. Halgren's arm. "We should call the police," he urged. But before I could respond, a sickening realization hit me. If Elric's place was broken into, what about mine? Rushing back, I flung open my apartment door and froze. The scene that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. My sanctuary, the space I had so carefully curated, was in complete disarray. "Oh, dear Lord," Mr. Halgren muttered behind me. I stumbled inside, surveying the chaos. Picture frames shattered, books scattered, cushions ripped open. It was as if a tornado had ripped through. But one thing immediately caught my eye, the glowing screen of my laptop, still intact amidst the wreckage. With trembling hands, I lifted the device and felt my world shift. Dozens of emails, all sent from my account, detailed confidential information about my employer's cybersecurity protocols. It was a damning trail of corporate espionage, and it was undeniably linked to me. My legs buckled, and I sank to the floor, clutching the laptop to my chest. Someone had framed me, and deep down, I knew exactly who it was. The question was why? And how far would Elric go to destroy me? As the initial shock wore off, my mind raced to make sense of the incriminating evidence staring back at me. Corporate espionage was a federal offense, one that could land me in prison for years. But why would Elric go to such lengths to frame me? The answer hit me like a ton of bricks. The inheritance money from our parents. After their untimely deaths in a car accident 5 years ago, the bulk of their considerable estate had been left to me. Elric had always resented that decision, claiming our parents favored me, but the truth was, his reckless spending and mounting debts made him an untrustworthy custodian of the family's wealth. With a few clicks, I accessed the email trail, my hands shaking as I scanned the damning messages. Each one contained sensitive data that could cripple my employer's network security, product roadmaps, customer lists, even source code for their flagship software. And they were all linked back to my corporate account. "This can't be happening," I muttered, bile rising in my throat. "What is it, dear?" Mr. Halgren asked, his voice laced with concern. I turned the laptop toward him, revealing the incriminating messages. "Someone's trying to frame me for stealing company secrets." His eyes widened as he read through the emails. But who would do such a thing? The answer was painfully obvious, but I couldn't bring myself to voice the name. Instead, I pulled up the account logs, tracing the origin of the messages. To my dismay, the timestamps aligned with the time frame Mr. Halgren had mentioned, when he heard noises coming from Elric's apartment. "Arya?" Mr. Halgren prodded gently. I swallowed hard, the bitter truth leaving an acrid taste in my mouth. It was Elric. He broke into my place and sent these emails to make it look like I'm selling company secrets. The elderly man's brow furrowed in disbelief. "But why would your own brother do such a terrible thing?" A mirthless laugh escaped my lips. "Money, greed, jealousy, take your pick." I shook my head, disgusted. "He's always resented that our parents left the inheritance to me instead of him." Memories of our last explosive argument flooded back, Elric's words cutting like knives. "You don't deserve a penny of what's rightfully mine. I'll make you pay for this, Arya. Mark my words." At the time, I'd brushed off his threats as empty tantrums. But now, as I stared at the damning evidence, the true depths of his depravity became chillingly clear. "We need to call the authorities," Mr. Halgren urged, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. I wanted nothing more than to have Elric arrested, to see him pay for his betrayal. But something held me back, a nagging voice in my head that whispered of another way, a path that would ensure his downfall was complete and utterly merciless. Clenching my jaw, I made a decision that would set in motion a vicious game of revenge, one that would force Elric to reap the consequences of his actions in the most devastating way possible. "Not yet," I said, my voice steely with resolve. "I have a better idea." Over the next few days, I threw myself into an investigation to uncover the full scope of Elric's treachery. Using my cybersecurity skills, I traced the origin of the incriminating emails back to his apartment's Wi-Fi network. But that was just the beginning. Digging deeper, I discovered security footage from the building's parking garage that confirmed my worst suspicions. The grainy video showed Elric slipping into my apartment complex around 10 p.m., just a few hours before Mr. Halgren had heard the disturbance next door. My blood boiled as I watched my brother's familiar figure furtively making his way inside, no doubt to plant the evidence that would frame me for corporate espionage. The sheer, calculated nature of his betrayal left me reeling. I knew I needed to confront him, to look him in the eye and demand an explanation for his despicable actions. But part of me feared what I might find lurking beneath the surface, the true depths of his depravity. Still, I steeled my resolve and arranged to meet him at a nearby cafe, neutral territory where he wouldn't feel cornered. As I waited at a secluded table, my fingers drummed an anxious rhythm on the tabletop. The bell above the door jingled, and Elric sauntered in, his expression a mask of casual indifference, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around the room before finally settling on me. "Arya?" He greeted flatly, sliding into the chair across from me. "It's been a while." "Cut the crap, Elric," I snapped, shoving my laptop across the table. The incriminating emails were displayed in all their damning glory. "You broke into my place and tried to frame me for selling company secrets. Why?" For a moment, his facade cracked, and I glimpsed the churning mixture of rage and desperation that simmered beneath. But then, just as quickly, he regained his composure, his lips curling into a sneer. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" he spat, leaning forward menacingly. "Always the perfect one, Mommy and Daddy's golden child. Well, let me tell you something. That inheritance should have been mine." I recoiled at the venom in his voice, but he wasn't done. "Do you have any idea what I've been through?" he hissed. "Drowning in debt, struggling to make ends meet while you're living the high life off our parents' money. You didn't deserve a penny of what they left you." His words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and I found myself struggling to breathe. This wasn't just about greed or jealousy. It was a twisted, all-consuming hatred that had festered for years. "So you decided to try and send me to prison?" I countered, incredulous. "You're sick, Elric, truly sick." He let out a harsh laugh, devoid of any mirth. "Prison would have been too good for you. No, I wanted to see you utterly ruined, stripped of everything you hold dear. That inheritance was supposed to be my salvation, my way out of this hellhole I've been living in. And you stole that from me." In that moment, I saw the true depths of his malice, and a part of me shriveled inside. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stripping him of the power he so desperately craved, dismantling his delusions of entitlement until he had nothing left. As I stared into the abyss of his blackened soul, I knew there was no turning back. The game was on, and I would stop at nothing to ensure Elric's downfall was absolute. In the days following my confrontation with Elric, a cold determination settled over me. His twisted sense of entitlement and utter disregard for the consequences of his actions had solidified my resolve. He needed to be stopped, and I was the only one who could do it. But I couldn't just turn him in, not after the lengths he'd gone to frame me. No, I needed a more surgical strike, a plan that would dismantle his delusions of grandeur and leave him with nowhere to run. Digging deeper into his activities, I uncovered a trail of shady dealings and black market transactions, a desperate attempt to fund his lavish lifestyle through illegal means. Suddenly, his obsession with the inheritance money made sickening sense. It wasn't just about greed. It was about fueling his criminal enterprises. With each new discovery, the pieces fell into place, revealing the true extent of his depravity. He was a cancer, slowly spreading his poison through our family's legacy, and I was the only one with the skills to excise that malignant growth once and for all. I began meticulously documenting every shred of evidence, building an airtight case against him. Bank statements, encrypted communications, even grainy surveillance footage, nothing was left uncovered. It was all part of a larger strategy, a chess game where I held the advantage of foresight and preparation. As the weeks ticked by, I could sense Elric's growing unease, the way his eyes would dart around whenever we crossed paths, as if he knew the walls were closing in. But still, he maintained his facade of arrogance, convinced that his misdeeds were safely hidden from view. Little did he know that I was merely biding my time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. That chance came in the form of a family gathering, one of those obligatory affairs where distant relatives would congregate and exchange forced pleasantries. Elric, ever the opportunist, saw it as a chance to flaunt his ill-gotten wealth, parading around like a peacock in his designer suit and flashy watch. But I had other plans. Carefully, I began weaving a web of subtle revelations, dropping breadcrumbs of information about Elric's shady dealings in hushed conversations with our more influential relatives. A whispered comment here, a pointed glance there, each carefully calculated to plant the seeds of suspicion. And of course, I made sure Elric was always within earshot, close enough to catch the murmurs of an impending investigation, the hints of his empire crumbling around him. I could see the cracks forming in his carefully constructed veneer, the beads of sweat forming on his brow as paranoia took root. With each passing hour, his forced laughter became more strained, his movements more erratic. By the time the evening drew to a close, Elric was a shell of his former self, his once cocky swagger replaced by a haunted look of desperation. As he made his way out, our eyes locked for a brief moment, and I knew he could see the triumph glinting in my gaze. The game was nearing its climax, and I held all the cards. All that was left was to sit back and watch as Elric's world unraveled, the consequences of his actions finally catching up to him in the most poetic of ways. The weeks following the family gathering were a masterclass in psychological warfare. With each passing day, I could see the toll my carefully orchestrated revelations were taking on Elric. The once cocky swagger had given way to a perpetual state of unease, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. And I was more than happy to oblige, strategically leaking just enough information to keep the pressure mounting. A whispered conversation here, a pointed look there, each one designed to reinforce the growing paranoia that his world was crumbling around him. It was a delicate dance, one that required equal parts patience and precision. Too much, too soon, and he might bolt, scattering his misdeeds to the wind. But too little, and the fear might dissipate, allowing him to regain his footing. So I bided my time, methodically tightening the noose until the slightest movement would spell his undoing. The breaking point came one evening as I was leaving the office. My phone buzzed with a frantic call from Elric, his voice a strangled whisper on the other end. "Arya, please, you have to help me." I could barely contain my smirk as I replied, feigning ignorance. "Help you with what, exactly?" There was a pause, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his desperate mind, weighing the pros and cons of confiding in me. It's about the stuff I've been involved with," he finally admitted, his words laced with thinly veiled panic. "The illegal dealings, the black market trades, everything. Someone's on to me, Arya. I don't know how, but they know." A twisted sense of satisfaction unfurled in my chest at the sound of his franticness. This was it, the moment I'd been meticulously orchestrating for weeks. The trap was sprung, and Elric was caught squarely in its jaws. "Well, well, well," I murmured, savoring the moment. "It seems the tables have turned, dear brother." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, and I could envision his eyes widening in horrified realization. "You," he stammered, the word thick with accusation. "You did this. You set me up." A low, humorless chuckle escaped my lips. "I didn't set you up, Elric. I merely provided the rope for you to hang yourself with. A rope expertly woven from your own misdeeds and insatiable greed." There was a beat of silence, and then his voice returned. low and pleading. "Arya, please, you have to help me. I'm your brother, flesh and blood. Whatever I've done, I'll make it right, I swear. Just don't let them take me." His desperate pleas should have stirred something within me, some lingering shred of familial loyalty. But as I stood there, bathed in the flickering glow of street lamps, all I felt was a cold, steely resolve. "You brought this on yourself, Elric," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth or compassion. "And now you'll face the consequences of your actions alone." With that, I ended the call, leaving him to stew in the bitter juices of his own making. The endgame was in motion, and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, the authorities closed in like a vice, meticulously dismantling Elric's criminal empire piece by piece. And through it all, I watched from the sidelines, a silent spectator to his downfall, reveling in the sweet taste of justice being served. The sound of the doorbell pierced the tranquil silence of my apartment, jolting me from my reverie. With a resigned sigh, I already knew who it was. Sure enough, when I opened the door, Elric stood on the other side, his once immaculate appearance now disheveled and haggard. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark circles, and his expensive suit hung loosely from his frame. "You have to help me, Arya," he rasped, his voice a mere shadow of its former arrogant timbre. "They're closing in, and I don't know what to do." I regarded him coolly, unmoved by his desperate plea. "And why, pray tell, should I lift a finger to help you?" Elric's face contorted into a mask of anguish, his pride finally crumbling under the weight of his dire circumstances. "Because I'm your brother, damn it! We're family!" A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Family? You forfeited any claim to that when you tried to frame me and steal what little I had left of our parents' legacy." His shoulders slumped, and for a moment I almost felt a twinge of pity. Almost. "I was desperate, Arya," he pleaded, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "You have to understand, I was drowning in debt, and the inheritance was my only way out. I never meant for things to go this far." I arched an eyebrow, unconvinced. "And the corporate espionage? The black market dealings? Were those acts of desperation too?" Elric flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor in shame. "I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I'm paying for them, Arya. Isn't that enough?" Shaking my head, I fixed him with a steely glare. "No, Elric. It's not enough. Not even close." His head snapped up, eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you brought this upon yourself," I stated, my voice hardening. "You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it. The authorities are closing in, and there's nothing I can do to stop it." Elric's face crumpled, and for a moment I thought he might actually break down and cry. But then, like a switch being flipped, his expression hardened, and a familiar glint of defiance flashed in his eyes. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" He spat, his tone laced with venom. "Watching me squirm, seeing me brought low. Well, let me tell you something, sister dearest. I'm not going down without a fight." I met his gaze unflinchingly, unimpressed by his bravado. "It's over, Elric. Your little criminal empire is crumbling, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." He opened his mouth, no doubt to hurl another venomous retort. But the sound of approaching sirens cut him off. His head whipped around, eyes widening in panic as the wail of the sirens grew louder. "This isn't over," he hissed, backing away from my door. "You haven't seen the last of me, Arya." But even as the words left his lips, I could see the fear flickering in his eyes. He knew it was a hollow threat, a desperate attempt to cling to whatever shred of power he had left. As the police cars screeched to a halt outside my building, Elric turned and bolted, disappearing into the night like a cornered rat fleeing from the light. And in that moment, I felt a sense of profound satisfaction wash over me. The game was finally over, and I had won. Elric's downfall was complete, and he had no one to blame but himself. The weeks following Elric's desperate visit were a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, the authorities had wasted no time in dismantling his criminal enterprise, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice. I found myself being called in for questioning, forced to recount every sordid detail of my brother's misdeeds. It was a cathartic experience, purging the festering wound of his betrayal with each damning revelation. Through it all, Elric remained defiant, lashing out at anyone and everyone within his reach. His once charming facade had been stripped away, revealing the true depths of his malice and depravity. The trial itself was a media circus, with reporters and camera crews swarming the courthouse like vultures circling a carcass. Elric, of course, played it up for the cameras, alternating between proclamations of innocence and vitriolic tirades against me. But in the end, the evidence was too overwhelming, the trail of breadcrumbs I had carefully laid too intricate to unravel. One by one, the charges were read: corporate espionage, fraud, racketeering, and a litany of other offenses that would make even the most hardened criminal blanch. And through it all, Elric maintained his arrogant sneer, as if daring the world to try and break him. That is, until the verdict was announced. The silence in the courtroom was deafening as the judge cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over the gathered spectators before finally settling on my brother. On the charges of corporate espionage, fraud, racketeering, and numerous counts of illegal black market dealings, this court finds the defendant, Elric Lane, guilty on all counts. The words hung in the air like a suffocating fog, and for a moment I thought Elric might actually collapse. His face drained of color, his mouth working soundlessly as the full weight of the verdict crashed down upon him. But then, just as quickly as it had come, the moment passed. His features hardened, and he fixed me with a look of pure unadulterated hatred. "You did this?" he hissed, straining against the bailiffs who were already moving to escort him from the courtroom. "You're the one who destroyed everything, Arya. You'll pay for this, I swear to God." His venomous words were met with stoic silence from the gallery, and I merely held his gaze, unflinching. In that moment, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of triumph or vindication. Just a profound sense of relief that the nightmare was finally over. The weeks and months that followed were a blur of sentencing hearings and legal proceedings, each one hammering another nail into the coffin of Elric's once promising future. He was slapped with a hefty prison sentence, as well as crippling fines and restitutions that would ensure he would never again taste the lavish lifestyle he had so coveted. And through it all, I remained a silent observer, watching as the brother I had once loved was slowly stripped of everything: his wealth, his freedom, his very identity. It was a bitter victory, to be sure, but a necessary one. Elric's greed and envy had poisoned our family's legacy, and the only way to excise that malignant growth was to cut it out, root and stem. As I sat in the courtroom gallery, watching him be led away in shackles, I felt a strange sense of finality wash over me. The chapter of my life that had been defined by his malevolence was finally closed, and I was free to move on, to forge a new path, unburdened by the weight of his betrayal. It was a bittersweet feeling, tempered by the lingering sorrow of what might have been, had he chosen a different path. But in the end, Elric had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it, alone, with nothing but the bitter taste of karma to keep him company. Months ticked by, the weight of Elric's downfall gradually lifting from my shoulders with each passing day. It was a strange feeling, this newfound lightness, as if a dark cloud had finally parted, allowing the warmth of the sun to wash over me once again. I found myself rediscovering simple pleasures I had long taken for granted: the freedom to come and go as I pleased without the specter of his malice looming overhead, the ability to surround myself with people who genuinely cared for me, not just what I could provide them. It was a rebirth of sorts, a chance to shed the baggage of my past and forge a new path forward, one untainted by the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. Of course, there were still moments when the memories would come creeping back, uninvited guests at the party of my newfound contentment. But those fleeting pangs of anger or sorrow were quickly tempered by the knowledge that I had emerged victorious, that Elric's twisted machinations had ultimately been his undoing. In many ways, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to weather even the most devastating of storms and come out stronger on the other side. It was a lesson I carried with me as I embarked on the next chapter of my life, leaving the city that had been the backdrop for so much turmoil and striking out in search of greener pastures. My newfound independence manifested itself in the form of a burgeoning cybersecurity consulting firm, a venture that allowed me to channel my skills and expertise into something truly meaningful. And with each successful project, each satisfied client, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that had long been denied me. But perhaps the greatest source of fulfillment came in the form of mentoring young women just starting out in the field, imparting not just technical knowledge, but also the hard-won lessons of perseverance and self-belief that had carried me through my darkest hours. It was a full-circle moment, a chance to pay forward the kindness and support that had once been so desperately lacking in my own life. And so as the sun began to dip below the horizon on another eventful day, I found myself reflecting on the winding path that had brought me to this point, the triumphs, the heartaches, and everything in between. The sound of the doorbell pulled me from my reverie, and I rose to answer it, a faint smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Mr. Halgren?" I greeted warmly, ushering the elderly man inside. "Right on time, as always," he chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mirth. "You know me, Arya. Punctuality is my middle name." As I led him to the dining room, already set for our weekly dinner ritual, I couldn't help but feel a swell of gratitude for his unwavering presence throughout the ordeal with Elric. He had been my rock, my anchor in the storm, and for that I would be forever grateful. "So," he said, settling into his chair with a contented sigh, "how's the new business venture coming along?" I felt a genuine smile spread across my face as I launched into an enthusiastic update, the weight of my past finally lifting as I looked ahead to the boundless possibilities that awaited. It was a new beginning, a fresh start untainted by the shadows of my brother's malice. And as I sat there, basking in the warmth of Mr. Halgren's company, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken. For the first time in a long time, I was truly free. I couldn't believe my ears. As I mingled with relatives at the family reunion, I overheard Rick, my brother-in-law, snickering with his friends. "Once I get that idiot sister-in-law out of the way, the family business will be all ours." A sinking feeling gripped my stomach. Rick had always been arrogant, but I never imagined he harbored such malicious intentions against me. I glanced across the room at my husband, Alan, laughing with his parents, oblivious to the venom spewing from his own brother's mouth. Later that evening, as Alan and I tucked our son, Oliver, into bed, I found myself at a loss for words. How could I shatter the illusion of our perfect family? Oliver's innocent eyes brimmed with love, and I couldn't bring myself to burden his young mind with the harsh reality. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle shifts in Alan's behavior. He grew more distant, often lost in thought, and our once effortless conversations became strained. I couldn't help but wonder if Rick had already planted seeds of doubt about me. One night, Alan broke the news that shook me to my core. "My parents think it's a good idea to invest in Rick's new venture. He's got a solid business plan, and they believe it could be a game-changer for the family." I tried to reason with him, expressing my concerns about Rick's motives, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Alan's unwavering trust in his family blinded him to the potential consequences of such a risky investment. As the weeks passed, the strain between us intensified. Oliver, ever perceptive, picked up on the tension, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber silence. I couldn't bear to see my once happy family crumbling before my eyes. Desperate for answers, I confided in my closest friend, Samantha. Her unwavering support and objective perspective provided the clarity I needed. Together, we began gathering evidence of Rick's past misdeeds, slowly unraveling the web of lies he had carefully constructed. With each damning piece of information we uncovered, my resolve grew stronger. I knew I had to confront Rick, to expose his true nature before he succeeded in tearing my family apart. The stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined, but I was determined to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. In the following weeks, Rick's influence over my in-laws grew stronger. He painted me as a manipulative outsider, hell-bent on undermining the family's legacy. With each conversation, his poisonous words eroded their trust in me. "Marla's been filling your head with nonsense," Rick said during one of his frequent visits. "She's threatened by my success and is trying to sabotage the business deal." Alan's parents nodded solemnly, their expressions a mixture of concern and doubt. It broke my heart to see the once unshakable bond within our family fracturing. At home, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Alan, swayed by Rick's persuasive lies, became increasingly distant and argumentative. "Why can't you just support me on this?" he snapped one evening after I voiced my reservations about the investment. "It's a fantastic opportunity, and you're letting your personal issues with Rick cloud your judgment." I recoiled at the harshness of his words, feeling helpless in the face of Rick's insidious machinations. Oliver, ever the sensitive child, retreated into himself, sensing the tension that permeated our once happy household. I ached to shield him from the turmoil, but the cracks in our family's foundation were becoming too prominent to ignore. "Dad's been acting weird lately." Oliver confided in me one night as I tucked him into bed. "Is everything okay?" I forced a reassuring smile, stroking his hair gently. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything will be all right." Even as the words left my lips, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. How could I mend what Rick had so skillfully torn apart? Desperate for a glimmer of hope, I clung to the evidence Samantha and I had gathered, determined to expose Rick's deceitful ways. But with each passing day, the task seemed more daunting, as his lies enveloped my family like a suffocating shroud. One evening, as Alan and I sat in stony silence over dinner, he dropped a bombshell that shattered what little remained of my optimism. "I've decided to go ahead with the investment," he stated flatly, avoiding my gaze. "Rick has assured me it's a solid opportunity, and my parents are fully on board." My heart sank as I realized the extent of Rick's manipulation. He had successfully driven a wedge between Alan and me, exploiting my husband's loyalty to his family for his own nefarious gains. "Alan, please," I pleaded, my voice trembling with emotion. "Can't you see what he's doing? He's using you, using all of us for his own benefit." But my words fell on deaf ears. Alan had made up his mind, and Rick's influence had taken root too deeply. As I lay awake that night, the weight of the situation bearing down on me, I knew I had to act decisively. Rick's treachery could no longer be tolerated. I would expose him, no matter the cost, and reclaim the family he had so callously sought to destroy. With Samantha's unwavering support, I doubled down on my efforts to expose Rick's true nature. We pored over financial records, scoured through emails, and followed every lead, no matter how small. Our diligence paid off when we uncovered evidence of Rick's embezzlement from the family business. Invoices for non-existent expenses, suspicious wire transfers, it was all there, meticulously documented, painting a damning picture of his greed and deceit. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I confronted Alan, determined to make him see the truth. "Rick has been stealing from the company," I stated bluntly, spreading the evidence across the kitchen table. "He's been siphoning funds for his own gain, and now he's trying to drag us all down with this bogus investment." Alan's brow furrowed as he examined the documents, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "This can't be right," he muttered, shaking his head. "Rick would never do something like this." I could see the internal struggle playing out on his face, the desire to trust his brother-in-law warring with the mounting evidence of betrayal. "Open your eyes, Alan," I pleaded, my frustration mounting. "He's been manipulating you, all of us, from the start. This is just the tip of the iceberg." For a moment, I thought I had finally gotten through to him. Alan's gaze met mine, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, his expression hardened. "This is just another one of your schemes," he spat, pushing the documents away. "You're so desperate to turn me against my own family that you'd resort to fabricating evidence." His words stung like a physical blow, and I recoiled at the venom in his tone. How could he still be so blind to Rick's machinations? In the days that followed, the tension in our household was palpable. Alan and I barely spoke, our interactions reduced to terse exchanges and icy glares. Oliver, sensing the rift between us, retreated further into himself, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber silence that broke my heart. It was during one of these strained silences that I noticed a flicker of doubt cross Alan's face. He had been studying the investment paperwork, his brow furrowed in concentration, when suddenly his eyes narrowed. "Something's not adding up," he murmured, more to himself than to me. Seizing the opportunity, I approached him cautiously, pointing out the discrepancies I had noticed. The inflated projections, the questionable financial backing, the inconsistencies in Rick's pitch. For the first time, I saw the scales begin to tip in my favor. Alan's unwavering faith in his brother-in-law wavered as the evidence mounted, and the cracks in Rick's carefully constructed facade started to show. The arguments that followed were intense, with tempers flaring and voices raised. But through it all, I clung to the hope that Alan was finally seeing the truth, that the person he had trusted implicitly was nothing more than a master manipulator driven by greed and selfishness. As the dust settled, a newfound determination took root within me. Rick's deceit would no longer be tolerated, and I would stop at nothing to expose him, even if it meant risking the fragile bonds that remained within our fractured family. The next family gathering was a tense affair, with undercurrents of mistrust and animosity simmering beneath the surface. I could feel Rick's eyes boring into me, his smug expression a silent challenge. Mustering my courage, I approached him as he mingled with his cronies, the evidence of his misdeeds clutched tightly in my hand. "We need to talk," I stated firmly, my voice carrying across the room. Rick's eyes narrowed, but he quickly plastered on a false smile. "Of course, dear sister-in-law. What seems to be the problem?" I handed him the stack of documents, my hand trembling slightly with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "These are records of your embezzlement from the family business," I stated, my voice unwavering. "Proof of your lies and deceit." A hush fell over the room as heads turned in our direction, the weight of my accusation hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, Rick's composure faltered, his eyes widening ever so slightly, but he quickly regained his footing, letting out a dismissive chuckle. "Really, Marla? Falsifying documents now?" He shook his head, his gaze sweeping across the gathered family members. "This is just another one of her pathetic attempts to undermine me." I opened my mouth to protest, but Rick cut me off, his voice dripping with contempt. "Don't think I don't know what you're up to," he sneered, taking a step closer. "You're threatened by my success, by the respect I've earned within this family. So you resort to these petty tactics, trying to turn everyone against me." My hands clenched into fists at my sides as Rick's words washed over me, each syllable dripping with venom. I could see the doubt flickering in the eyes of my relatives, their allegiances wavering. Alan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Marla, is this true? Have you been fabricating evidence?" The weight of his question hung in the air, and I felt the eyes of the entire room upon me. In that moment, I realized the enormity of what was at stake, not just the exposure of Rick's deceit, but the very fabric of our family's trust. Swallowing hard, I met Alan's gaze. "No," I stated firmly. "Every document, every piece of evidence is legitimate. I would never stoop to such levels." Rick scoffed, but I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word. "Look at the records, Alan. Look at the wire transfers, the bogus invoices. It's all there, plain as day. Rick has been stealing from the business, from our family, for years." A heavy silence blanketed the room as my words sank in, the weight of the accusation hanging thick in the air. I could see the conflict playing out on Alan's face, the struggle between his loyalty to his brother-in-law and the nagging doubts that had taken root. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "I need proof," he said, his voice low and measured. "Concrete, irrefutable proof of what you're claiming." A surge of determination coursed through me. If proof was what he needed, then proof I would give him. "You'll have it," I promised, my gaze unwavering. "And when you do, you'll see Rick for the liar and manipulator he truly is." As the gathering dispersed, the tension lingering in the air, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. It was time to take the gloves off and fight for the truth, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was palpable as the family gathered for the emergency meeting. Accusations had been hurled, loyalties tested, and the once solid foundation of our clan had started to crumble. Rick strode into the room, his cocky demeanor a stark contrast to the somber expressions of the others. He shot me a smug glance, as if taunting me to make my next move. Alan cleared his throat, his expression grave. "We're here to address the allegations made against Rick." I could feel every eye on me as I rose from my seat, clutching the recording device in my trembling hand. This was it, the moment of truth. "I have proof," I announced, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "Proof of Rick's deceit and his intentions to undermine this family for his own gain." Rick scoffed, but I pressed on, hitting the play button on the recorder. His voice, smug and self-assured, filled the room. "Once I get that idiot sister-in-law out of the way, the family business will be all ours." A collective gasp rippled through the room as the damning words echoed off the walls. I watched as the color drained from Rick's face, his mask of arrogance slipping away. That's not what it sounds like," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. But the recording played on, each sentence a nail in the coffin of his lies. Been siphoning funds for years. Bogus investment turned the family against her. By the time the recording ended, the room was deathly silent, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the air. All eyes were fixed on Rick, the once untouchable golden boy now exposed as a fraud and a manipulator. Alan's expression was one of utter disbelief, a mixture of anger and hurt etched onto his features. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. Rick opened his mouth, no doubt to spew forth more lies, but Alan held up a hand, silencing him. "No more," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You've done enough damage." In that moment, it was as if the scales had fallen from everyone's eyes. The web of deceit that Rick had so carefully woven was unraveling before our very eyes, and the true depths of his betrayal were laid bare. One by one, family members rose to their feet, their expressions a mixture of disgust and outrage. Even Rick's most ardent supporters couldn't deny the damning evidence. "You're finished," Alan's father spat, his face twisted with anger. "Get out of my sight and never show your face here again." Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his once smug demeanor reduced to a pathetic display of stammering and denial. As he was unceremoniously escorted from the room, his protests falling on deaf ears, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. The battle had been long and hard fought, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. Yet even as I basked in the victory, a pang of sadness tugged at my heart. This was my family, fractured and torn apart by the very person who should have been its strongest ally. The road to healing would be long and arduous, but I knew we would walk it together, stronger and wiser for the trials we had endured. As the dust settled and the adrenaline began to fade, I turned to Alan, our eyes meeting in a silent exchange of understanding and shared relief. The worst was over, but the real work was just beginning. In the aftermath of Rick's stunning downfall, the family was in turmoil. Loyalties were divided, with some still clinging to the belief that he had been wronged, while others rallied around Alan and me, determined to excise the cancer that had festered within our ranks. Rick, however, was not one to go down without a fight. Bitter and vengeful, he launched a campaign of lies and manipulation, attempting to turn the tide of opinion back in his favor. "She's been plotting this from the start," he hissed to anyone who would listen. "Marla's always been jealous of my success, and she saw an opportunity to take me down." His words were like poison, seeping into the minds of the more gullible family members, sowing seeds of doubt and mistrust. But I was no longer the meek, passive woman he had once dismissed. With Alan's unwavering support and the weight of the truth on my side, I pushed back against Rick's slander, countering his lies with irrefutable evidence and heartfelt pleas. "Look at the facts," I implored our relatives, laying out the paper trail of Rick's misdeeds. "He's the one who betrayed us, who put his own greed above the family's well-being." It was an uphill battle, but slowly the tide began to turn. Those who had once been swayed by Rick's silver tongue saw the truth for what it was, and their allegiance shifted back to the family's side. Still, Rick remained defiant, his desperation mounting with each blow to his crumbling facade. It was during one of these tense standoffs that he crossed a line, threatening me with veiled implications of violence. "You'll regret this," he snarled, his face twisted with rage. "No one crosses me and gets away with it." I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated by his hollow threats. But Alan, ever the protector, would not let such an affront go unanswered. In a blur of motion, he lunged forward, grabbing Rick by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "Don't you ever threaten her again," he growled, his face inches from Rick's. "Or I swear, I'll make you regret the day you were born." The raw fury in Alan's voice sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't deny the swell of pride and love I felt in that moment. This was the man I had married, strong, loyal, and fiercely protective of those he loved. Rick, for once, was rendered speechless, his bravado crumbling in the face of Alan's righteous anger. It was a pivotal moment, a symbolic shifting of power that left no doubt as to who held the moral high ground. As Alan released his grip, Rick slunk away, his tail firmly between his legs. It was a humiliating defeat, witnessed by those who had once revered him as the golden child. In the days that followed, the family rallied around us, offering their support and condemnation of Rick's actions. The once fractured clan was slowly mending, united in their determination to move forward and leave the toxic legacy of betrayal behind. Yet, even as the dust settled and a sense of normalcy began to return, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rick's story was not yet over. He was a cornered animal, backed into a corner of his own making, and I knew from experience that such creatures were capable of lashing out with desperate, unpredictable fury. But I was no longer afraid. With Alan by my side and the truth as our shield, we were ready to face whatever Rick threw our way. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. With Rick's deceit exposed and his influence over the family shattered, Alan and I turned our focus to restoring order and trust within the business. It was a daunting task, made all the more challenging by the lingering doubts and divisions that Rick's machinations had sown. We pored over financial records, untangling the web of lies and cover-ups that had been woven over the years. Each discrepancy, each hidden transaction, was like a dagger to the heart, a stark reminder of the depth of Rick's betrayal. As the true extent of the damage became clear, Alan's parents struggled with a deep sense of guilt and shame. How could they have been so blind to the deceit unfolding right under their noses? We trusted him implicitly, Alan's mother confessed, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. He was family, and we never imagined he could be capable of such treachery. It was a sentiment echoed by many, a collective reckoning with the harsh reality that even those closest to us can harbor the darkest of intentions. But through it all, Alan and I remained steadfast in our resolve to rebuild what had been torn asunder. We held meetings, both formal and informal, to address the lingering concerns and doubts that had taken root. With patience and understanding, we listened to the grievances of those who had been swayed by Rick's lies, offering reassurance and a path forward. It was a slow and often frustrating process, but gradually the cracks began to mend. Trust, once shattered, was painstakingly rebuilt, one honest conversation at a time. As the business stabilized, we turned our attention to the legal ramifications of Rick's actions. With the evidence we had gathered, the authorities had no choice but to pursue charges for embezzlement and fraud. The day Rick was taken into custody, a hush fell over the family. There was no joy, no sense of triumph, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. Family bonds, once cherished, had been irreparably severed by greed and deceit. In the aftermath, we sought solace in professional counseling, recognizing the need for outside guidance to navigate the complex emotions and trauma we had endured. It was a humbling experience, but one that ultimately brought us closer together as a family. During one particularly poignant session, Alan's father broke down, his stoic facade crumbling as he confronted the depth of his own culpability. "I should have seen it," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have protected you all from his poisonous influence." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of empathy wash over me. For all the pain and turmoil Rick had caused, he was still a part of this family, and his actions had left wounds that would take time and care to heal. As the weeks turned to months, a sense of normalcy began to return, tempered by a newfound appreciation for the bonds that had been tested and ultimately strengthened. Alan and I found ourselves drawing closer than ever, united in our shared triumph over adversity. It was during this period of healing and growth that we made the decision to renew our vows, a symbolic gesture of our unwavering commitment to one another and to the family we had fought so hard to protect. As I stood before Alan, surrounded by the loved ones who had weathered the storm alongside us, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. The road had been long and arduous, but we had emerged from the crucible of betrayal stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. In the months following our vow renewal, the family business began to thrive once more, the dark cloud of Rick's deceit finally lifting. With honesty and transparency at the helm, we regained the trust of our partners and clients, and the company's reputation was restored. Yet, Even as we celebrated our professional successes, there was a deeper, more personal victory that filled me with a profound sense of gratitude. The strength of our family bonds forged anew in the crucible of adversity. Gone were the days of whispered secrets and veiled accusations. In their place was a newfound openness, a commitment to communication and understanding that had been sorely lacking before. I would often catch Alan's parents sharing a knowing glance, their eyes shining with a mix of pride and relief. They had come perilously close to losing everything they held dear, and the lessons learned had left an indelible mark. "We're lucky to have you, Marla," Alan's mother confided one evening as we sipped tea on the patio. "If it weren't for your strength and perseverance, who knows where we'd be right now." Her words, spoken with such sincerity, brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had felt like an outsider, forever seeking acceptance and validation within this family. Now, at last, I felt truly seen and valued for who I was. Oliver, too, seemed to blossom in the newfound atmosphere of trust and stability. Gone was the somber, withdrawn child who had borne witness to the family's turmoil. In his place was a vibrant, confident young man, secure in the knowledge that the bonds that held us together were unbreakable. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he whispered one night as I tucked him into bed, his eyes shining with admiration. "You never gave up, even when things looked really bad." In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and love so intense, it threatened to overwhelm me. Through it all, the lies, the betrayal, the darkest moments when hope seemed lost, Oliver had been my guiding light, my unwavering reminder of what truly mattered. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, our family settled into a new normal, one built on the hard-won lessons of the past. There were still moments of tension, of course, as old wounds took time to fully heal, but we faced them head-on, with open hearts and a willingness to truly listen and understand one another. And through it all, Alan remained my steadfast partner, my rock in the storm. His unwavering love and support had been the bedrock upon which our family's redemption was built, and I found myself falling deeper in love with him with each passing day. It was on a warm summer evening, as we sat side by side on the porch swing, watching Oliver chase fireflies in the twilight, that I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The battles had been fought, the demons laid to rest, and we had emerged victorious, our bond stronger than ever before. "Can you believe how far we've come?" I murmured, leaning my head against Alan's shoulder. He smiled, his eyes filled with a mix of joy and hard-won wisdom. It wasn't an easy road, but it was worth every step. And in that moment, as the fireflies danced around us like tiny beacons of hope, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A family united, resilient, and unbreakable. I never knew silence could be so loud until I watched my brother's facade crumble, revealing a stranger beneath. The words seemed to echo in the stillness of the room, hanging like a dense fog after Marla's venomous attack on our mother, Elaine. Her lips curled into a smirk as she taunted, "You're just too meek and insignificant to stand up for yourself." I glanced at Everett, my brother, expecting him to defend our gentle mother, but he remained impassive. A hollow shell of the man I once knew. It was as if Marla's venom had seeped into his veins, numbing him to her cruelty. Rage boiled within me, and I found myself stepping forward, fists clenched. "How dare you speak to her that way?" I spat, my voice trembling with fury. Marla's eyes narrowed, and she sneered. "Stay out of this, Cadence. It doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't," I roared, closing the distance between us. "That's my mother you're berating, and I won't stand for it." Everett finally stirred, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Cadence, please, let it go." I shrugged him off, incredulous. "Let it go? Are you hearing yourself? She's treating Mom like garbage, and you're just letting it happen." Marla's laughter cut through the tension like a knife. "Poor, pathetic Elaine. She's lucky I even bother with her." She turned to Everett, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. "You see how she is, darling? Always needing to be coddled and fawned over." Everett's gaze dropped, and he nodded meekly, like a puppy being scolded. My heart broke for the brother I once knew, the confident, caring man who would have never tolerated such abuse. "Enough!" I roared, stepping between them. "I don't know what kind of twisted game you're playing, Marla, but it ends now. You will treat my mother with respect, or you can pack your bags and leave." Marla's eyes with fury, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. But then, as quickly as the storm had gathered, it dissipated, and she offered a sickly sweet smile. "Of course, Cadence, you're absolutely right. I'll be sure to watch my tongue around dear Elaine from now on." She swept past me, brushing my shoulder with hers as she exited the room. Everett followed her like a lost puppy, leaving me alone with my stunned mother. I gathered her into my arms, feeling her frail body tremble with silent sobs. "It's okay, Mom," I murmured, stroking her graying hair. "I won't let her hurt you anymore." As I held her close, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Marla's true nature had been revealed, and I knew in my heart that I had to protect my family, no matter the cost. The next few days were like walking on eggshells, each interaction fraught with tension. Marla's saccharine smiles were laced with venom, and Everett remained a hollow shell, refusing to acknowledge the rift that had formed. It wasn't until I stopped by Mom's house unannounced that the full extent of Marla's villainy became apparent. "Mom?" I called out as I stepped inside, taken aback by the unusual disarray. Dishes were piled high in the sink, and the floors were in desperate need of a vacuum. "In here, dear," came her weary voice from the living room. I found her slumped in her favorite armchair, a blanket draped over her lap as she knitted what appeared to be a scarf. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes, and her movements were slow and labored. "Mom, are you all right?" I asked, crossing the room to her side. She offered a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, darling. Just a bit tired, that's all." I frowned, taking in her disheveled appearance and the state of the house. "Have you been cooking and cleaning for Everett and Marla again?" Her gaze dropped, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. White-hot anger flared within me. "That's it. I'm putting a stop to this right now." Before she could protest, I was out the door and marching down the street towards Everett's place. I pounded on the door, barely containing my fury. Everett answered, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Cadence? What's going on?" "What's going on?" I echoed, jabbing a finger into his chest. "Your wife is running my mother ragged. That's what's going on." His eyes widened, and he glanced over his shoulder as if afraid Marla might overhear. "Keep your voice down," he hissed, stepping outside and pulling the door shut behind him. "I won't keep my voice down," I shouted, uncaring of who might hear. "Mom is exhausted, Everett. She's cooking, cleaning, and running herself into the ground just to keep Marla happy." He ran a hand over his face, his expression pained. I know. But Marla, she gets upset if things aren't just so." I stared at him, aghast. "Are you hearing yourself? You're letting her walk all over Mom because she throws a tantrum if she doesn't get her way?" Everett's shoulders slumped, and he dropped his gaze. "It's not that simple, Cadence. Marla, she has a way of making things difficult if I don't go along with what she wants." My hands balled into fists at my sides. "So what, you're just going to let her bully and manipulate all of us? Stand up for yourself, Everett. Stand up for our family." His jaw clenched, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the brother I once knew. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, and he shook his head wearily. "I can't, Cadence. I'm sorry." With those words, he retreated back into the house, leaving me seething on the doorstep. As I stormed away, I knew that this was only the beginning. Marla's twisted grip on my family was tightening, and I had to find a way to break it before it was too late. Frustration gnawed at me in the days that followed. Everett's submission to Marla's twisted demands was like watching a man slowly drown, and I knew I had to act before it was too late. "We need to find out more about her," I told Theo one evening as we prepared dinner. My husband's brow furrowed, but he nodded, sensing the resolve in my voice. That night, after the dishes were done, we began our search. Scouring the internet for any trace of Marla's past, we slowly pieced together a disturbing pattern. "Look at this," Theo murmured, his eyes glued to the screen. "It seems Marla was briefly married to a wealthy businessman a few years back. But the marriage only lasted 6 months before he filed for divorce, citing emotional distress and manipulation." I leaned closer, my heart sinking as I read the details. And here's another. She was engaged to a prominent lawyer, but he broke it off after discovering she'd been lying about her background and finances. Page after page painted a chilling portrait of a woman who thrived on deceit and exploitation. Marla would charm and seduce wealthy men, leeching off their fortunes until they inevitably saw through her facade. Then she would move on to her next target, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts in her wake. "She's a black widow," I whispered, feeling ill, "and Everett is her latest victim." Theo squeezed my hand, his expression grim. "We have to show him, Cadence. We have to make him see the truth before it's too late." I nodded, my jaw set with determination. The next day, I invited Everett over under the guise of a casual family dinner. As we sat around the table, I could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes kept flicking towards the door, as if he expected Marla to burst in at any moment. "Everett," I began, keeping my voice level, "we need to talk about Marla." He stiffened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. "What about her?" I took a steadying breath and launched into the details we'd uncovered, the string of failed marriages and broken engagements, the pattern of exploitation and deceit. As I spoke, I watched the color drain from Everett's face. He shook his head vehemently, his eyes wide with denial. No, you've got it all wrong. Marla would never." But the evidence was irrefutable, and with each new revelation, I could see the cracks in his facade deepening. Finally, when I had laid bare the full extent of Marla's machinations, Everett slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered, his voice thick with anguish. I reached across the table, resting my hand on his arm. "It's not too late, Everett. We can stop her before she destroys our family." He lifted his head, and I saw a flicker of the old Everett, the fierce determination that had once burned so brightly. "You're right," he said, his jaw set. "It's time to end this." As we began to formulate our plan, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The veil had been lifted, and now it was time to take back control from the woman who had wrought so much pain and misery. The confrontation with Marla was like a powder keg waiting to ignite. Everett and I had agreed to approach her together, our united front bolstered by the damning evidence we'd uncovered. I could sense Everett's trepidation as we stood on the doorstep of his home, but there was a newfound determination in his eyes that filled me with hope. Marla answered the door, her perfectly coiffed hair and immaculate makeup a stark contrast to the sneer that twisted her features. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo," she drawled, her gaze flickering between us with thinly veiled disdain. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Cut the act, Marla," I spat, pushing past her into the house. "We know what you've been up to." Her brows shot up, but her expression remained infuriatingly smug. "And what, pray tell, have I been up to?" Everett stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. "We know about your past, Marla. The marriages, the engagements, all the men you've manipulated and exploited for their money." For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a derisive laugh. "Oh, Everett, you can't possibly believe these ridiculous accusations, can you?" She sidled up to him, trailing a manicured hand down his arm. "Your sister is just jealous, darling. She's always resented our happiness." I opened my mouth to protest, but Everett held up a hand, his gaze boring into hers. "Don't bother, Marla," he said, his voice low and steady. "We have proof, documents, records, testimonies from your past victims. It's over." Her eyes narrowed to slits, and for the first time I saw the true depths of her malice laid bare. "You ungrateful wretch," she hissed, her words dripping with venom. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Everett remained unmoved, his jaw set in a firm line. "You've done nothing but lie and manipulate, Marla. It ends now." With a snarl of rage, she turned on me, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm as she grabbed me. "This is all you're doing, you meddling bitch," she spat, her face contorted in fury. "You're just jealous that your pathetic life will never measure up to mine." Before I could react, Everett had wedged himself between us, his hands gripping Marla's wrists as he pried her away. "That's enough," he growled, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "You're done manipulating this family, Marla. It's over." She struggled against his grip, her eyes wild with desperation. "You'll regret this, Everett," she shrieked. "I'll make sure you lose everything, your job, your money, your precious family." But her threats rang hollow, her carefully constructed facade lying in shattered pieces at our feet. As Everett hauled her towards the door, she turned her vitriol on me once more. You think you've won? She snarled. This is far from over, Cadence. Mark my words, you'll pay for this. And with that, she was gone, her angry screams echoing down the street as Everett slammed the door behind her. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of what had transpired hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Everett turned to me, his expression a mixture of shame and gratitude. Thank you, he murmured, pulling me into a fierce embrace. You saved me from a lifetime of misery. As I held him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph amidst the turmoil. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Marla's threats still lingered, a reminder that her vindictive nature knew no bounds. But in that moment, with my brother by my side once more, I knew we could weather any storm she threw our way. The family she had tried so desperately to fracture was now stronger than ever, and we would face her wrath together, united and unbreakable. In the days following Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. Everett seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Marla's parting threat still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was biding her time, plotting her next move. So when Theo came to me one evening, his expression grim, I steeled myself for the worst. Cadence, he began, settling beside me on the couch. I think we have a problem. My heart dropped, and I braced myself for whatever bombshell he was about to unleash. I just got off the phone with your dad, he continued. Apparently, Marla has been pressuring Everett to sell the family home. A chill ran down my spine as the implications sank in. The house wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of our family's legacy, a place where countless memories had been forged. She's trying to isolate him, I murmured, my hands clenching into fists. Strip away everything that ties him to us so she can worm her way back in. Theo nodded grimly. Your dad said Everett has been reluctant, but Marla is relentless. She's playing on his guilt, telling him it's the only way to make a fresh start. White-hot anger surged through me, and I shot to my feet, pacing the length of the living room. That conniving snake, I spat. After everything she's done, she still has the audacity to try and tear our family apart. Theo caught my arm, pulling me to a halt. Cadence, we have to do something. If she succeeds in getting Everett to sell the house, it'll be that much harder to break her hold over him. I took a deep breath, tamping down the fury that threatened to consume me. Theo was right. We needed a plan, a way to make Everett see the truth before it was too late. Call Dad, I said, my voice steely with resolve. Tell him we're staging an intervention tonight. It's time to put an end to Marla's games once and for all. A few hours later, we were gathered in the living room of the family home. Mom, Dad, Everett, Theo, and myself. The tension was thick, Everett's eyes darting toward the exits as if he expected Marla to burst through the door at any moment. What's this all about? He demanded, his gaze finally landing on me. I took a steadying breath, squaring my shoulders. It's about Marla, I said, holding his gaze, and her latest attempt to manipulate you into selling this house. His eyes widened and he opened his mouth to protest, but I forged ahead. Don't try to deny it, Everett. We know she's been pressuring you, playing on your guilt and insecurities. But can't you see? This is just another ploy to isolate you from your family, to make you dependent on her again. Everett's jaw clenched, and he shook his head vehemently. You're wrong, Cadence. Marla just wants what's best for us, a fresh start away from all the drama and conflict. I scoffed, feeling the frustration mount. Wake up, Everett. She's the one causing all the drama and conflict. She's a toxic parasite, and she'll never stop until she's drained every last ounce of life from this family. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Mom rise from her chair, her face etched with a determination I'd never seen before. Your sister is right, Everett, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. That woman's caused nothing but pain and misery since the day she wormed her way into our lives. She crossed the room, laying a hand on his arm. This house is our home, our legacy. Please don't let her take that away from us. Everett's gaze flickered between us, his expression a whirlwind of emotions. I could see the battle raging within him, the struggle between Marla's poisonous influence and the love for his family. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his shoulders slumped in defeat. You're right, he whispered, his voice thick with shame. "I've been so blind, so desperate to make things work with Marla that I've nearly lost everything that truly matters." He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I won't let her win, not this time. The house stays, and Marla—" He swallowed hard. "Marla is out of our lives for good." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, love and loyalty had prevailed over Marla's twisted machinations. As we gathered around Everett, enveloping him in an embrace, I knew that our family was finally on the path to healing. The shadows that had lingered for so long were fading, and a new dawn was on the horizon. One where Marla's poisonous influence could no longer reach us. The day of Mom's birthday celebration dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. As I helped her prepare for the party, arranging platters of her famous lemon bars and hanging streamers, I couldn't shake the sense of anticipation that buzzed through my veins. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, the moment when we would finally expose Marla's true nature to the world and break her hold over Everett once and for all. "You seem tense, dear," Mom murmured, laying a gentle hand on my arm. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just want to make sure your party is perfect." She returned my smile, her eyes shining with affection. "As long as my family is here, it will be." As the guests began to arrive, the house filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, a temporary reprieve from the turmoil that had plagued us for far too long. Everett arrived with a hesitant smile, his gaze constantly flicking towards the door as if expecting Marla to make an appearance. "It's going to be all right," I murmured, pulling him aside. "We're going to put an end to her lies once and for all." He nodded, his jaw set with determination, and rejoined the party. As the afternoon wore on, I could feel the tension mounting, the calm before the storm. Finally, when the last of the guests had arrived, I caught Theo's eye and gave him a subtle nod. It was time. Clearing my throat, I clinked my glass, calling for silence. "If I could have everyone's attention, please." The room gradually fell quiet, all eyes turning towards me with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "First and foremost," I began, "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my incredible mother on her birthday." A smattering of applause rippled through the crowd, and Mom ducked her head shyly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "However," I continued, my voice growing steely, "there is another reason we've gathered you all here today." I locked eyes with Everett, giving him a subtle nod of encouragement before turning my attention back to the assembled guests. For far too long, a dark shadow has loomed over this family, a poisonous presence that has sought to divide and manipulate us for her own selfish gain. My gaze swept over the crowd, daring anyone to look away. I'm speaking, of course, about Marla. A hush fell over the room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Everett tense, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the back of a chair. "Marla has woven a tangled web of lies and deceit," I pressed on, my voice ringing with conviction. "She has exploited and preyed upon my brother, leeching off his fortune and manipulating him into cutting ties with those who truly care about him." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd, but I forged ahead, laying bare the evidence we had gathered, the trail of broken engagements and failed marriages, the testimonies from her past victims. As I spoke, I could see the shock and revulsion etched on the faces of our guests, the realization sinking in that they had been duped by Marla's carefully constructed facade. Finally, when every last sordid detail had been exposed, I turned my gaze to Everett, who stood frozen, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and relief. "It's over, Everett," I said softly. "You're free of her poison." For a long moment he remained motionless, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Then, slowly, he straightened his shoulders, his features hardening with a newfound resolve. "You're right, Cadence," he said, his voice ringing out across the hushed room. "It's over." Turning on his heel, he strode towards the front door, throwing it open with a resounding bang, and there, frozen on the doorstep with a look of abject horror painted across her features, stood Marla. "You—" she sputtered, her perfectly manicured mask cracking as she took in the scene before her. "You can't do this to me." But her protests fell on deaf ears as Everett advanced, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "Get out," he growled, his words laced with a finality that brooked no argument. "You're not welcome here. Not anymore." For a beat, Marla seemed poised to argue, her mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. But as her gaze swept over the sea of accusatory stares, she must have realized the futility of her situation. With a cry of outrage, she whirled on her heel and stormed off into the night, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement as she disappeared from sight. A deafening silence hung in her wake, punctuated only by the occasional murmur or cough. Then, slowly, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a collective sigh of relief. As I looked around at the faces of my family and friends, I saw nothing but pride and support reflected back at me. We had faced down the darkness that had threatened to consume us, and emerged victorious, battered perhaps, but unbroken. And as Everett turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears, I knew that our journey towards healing had truly begun. In the days that followed Marla's explosive banishment from our lives, a palpable shift seemed to ripple through our family. It was as if a great weight had been lifted, a toxic cloud of negativity and manipulation that had hung over us for far too long. Everett, in particular, seemed to undergo a profound transformation. Gone was the haunted, hollow-eyed man who had been so thoroughly cowed by Marla's venom. In his place stood a man reborn, his shoulders squared and his gaze clear and focused. "It's like waking from a nightmare," he confided in me one evening as we sat on the porch, sipping lemonade and basking in the warm evening air. All this time, I was living in a fog, blind to the truth and trapped by her lies. I reached over, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're free of her now, Everett. We all are." He nodded, his expression solemn. "I just wish I had seen it sooner, before she had the chance to inflict so much pain and damage." A familiar pang of guilt twisted in my gut, but I pushed it aside. Dwelling on regrets would only hold us back from truly healing. "The important thing is that we made it through," I said firmly, "and now we can focus on rebuilding and moving forward as a family." Everett smiled, the weight of Marla's lingering specter seeming to lift from his shoulders. "You're right. It's a new beginning for all of us." As the days stretched into weeks, the true extent of Marla's deception began to unravel. It seemed that her pattern of exploitation and manipulation had cast a wide net, ensnaring countless victims over the years. One by one, they emerged from the shadows, emboldened by the news of her downfall and eager to share their stories. Tales of emotional abuse, financial ruin, and shattered lives poured forth, painting a chilling portrait of a woman utterly devoid of conscience or remorse. The fallout was swift and merciless. Marla's carefully constructed house of cards came crashing down around her, leaving her social standing in tatters, and her once abundant finances drained to the dregs. Through it all, Everett remained a pillar of strength, weathering the storm with a newfound resilience that inspired us all. Gone was the guilt and shame that had once weighed him down. In its place was a steely determination to make amends and move forward. "I can't change the past," he said during one of our many heart-to-heart conversations, "but I can damn well make sure the future is better for all of us." And true to his word, he did. With an unwavering focus, he set about rebuilding the relationships that Marla had so callously fractured, starting with our parents. It was a long and often painful process, fraught with difficult conversations and emotional revelations. But through it all, our family remained united, a bond forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our shared determination to triumph over Marla's poisonous legacy. As for my role, I took it upon myself to be the mediator, the calm voice of reason that helped guide our family through the turbulent waters of healing. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when tempers flared and progress seemed elusive. But I persevered, drawing strength from the knowledge that we were finally on the right path, a path that led away from the shadows and towards the light of a brighter future. And as the weeks turned into months, that future began to take shape before our very eyes. The rifts that had once seemed insurmountable slowly knitted themselves together, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the unbreakable bonds that tied us as a family. It was during one of our Sunday dinners, the table laden with Mom's famous pot roast, and the air filled with laughter and conversation, that I truly realized how far we had come. Gazing around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm, emerging battered but unbroken, our love and loyalty to one another stronger than ever before. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, fortified by the knowledge that the darkness that had once threatened to consume us had finally been banished for good. In the aftermath of Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. It was as if we had all been holding our collective breath, bracing for the next inevitable blow from her twisted machinations. But as the days stretched into weeks and her poisonous presence faded into a distant memory, we slowly began to exhale. Of course, the road to healing was far from smooth. Marla's betrayal had left deep scars, both emotional and financial. Everett, in particular, struggled with the fallout of her deceit, his once thriving business and personal accounts drained to the dregs by her relentless exploitation. "I feel like such a fool," he confided in me one evening, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "How could I have been so blind, so willing to hand over everything I've worked for to that parasite?" I wrapped an arm around his shoulders, offering what comfort I could. "You were manipulated, Everett. She preyed on your trust and twisted your devotion into a weapon against you. But that's over now." He nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "You're right. It's time to start rebuilding, to take back what she stole from me, from all of us." And rebuild we did, each of us shouldering a share of the burden. Mom and Dad opened their home to Everett, offering him a sanctuary as he sorted through the tangled mess of his finances. Theo, ever the level-headed voice of reason, helped devise a plan to get Everett's business back on track, utilizing his keen business acumen to plug the leaks and stem the tide of financial ruin. As for me, I became the glue that held our fractured family together. I organized weekly dinners, ensuring we all had a regular opportunity to come together and reconnect. I mediated the difficult conversations, lending an understanding ear and offering gentle guidance when tempers flared. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the strain of it all threatened to overwhelm me. But whenever I felt myself wavering, I would think back to those dark days when Marla's poisonous grip had nearly torn us apart, and I would find the strength to persevere. Slowly but surely the cracks began to mend, and our family emerged from the rubble stronger than ever before. Everett's business flourished under Theo's guidance, and he was able to regain his financial footing, a newfound humility and appreciation for the value of hard work shining through. Mom and Dad, too, seemed rejuvenated by the renewed sense of unity that bound us together. Gone were the hollow-eyed resignation and strained silences that had plagued them during Marla's reign of terror. In their place was a warmth and vibrancy that I hadn't seen in years, a reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had sustained our family through countless storms. And as for me, well, I found myself reinvigorated by the knowledge that my unwavering determination had played a pivotal role in our family's salvation. No longer was I content to be a mere bystander in life, watching from the sidelines as others shaped their destinies. I had tasted the power of taking action, of standing up for what was right, and I knew that I could never go back to the way things were before. It was this newfound sense of purpose that drove me to take on a new challenge: the restoration of our family home. The once proud manor had fallen into disrepair during Marla's toxic tenure, its rooms and halls battered by neglect and the weight of her corrosive presence. But now, with her shadow banished and our family united, I saw an opportunity to breathe new life into the heart of our legacy. Enlisting the help of Everett and Theo, we set about the task of restoring the grand old house to its former glory, stripping away the layers of grime and decay to reveal the beauty that had been hidden beneath. It was backbreaking work, filled with long hours and more than a few heated arguments. But through it all, we persevered, fueled by a shared sense of purpose and the knowledge that every nail hammered, every wall sanded, was a tangible symbol of our family's resilience and rebirth. And when the final coat of paint had dried and the last piece of furniture had been carefully arranged, we stood back and marveled at our handiwork. The house fairly glowed, its polished floors and gleaming woodwork a testament to the power of perseverance and love. It was on a warm summer evening, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, that we gathered on the front porch to celebrate our victory. Mom and Dad, hand in hand, their faces aglow with pride. Everett and Theo, shoulders brushing as they shared a conspiratorial grin. And me, standing in the midst of it all, my heart swelling with a sense of triumph and unbridled joy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To family, to resilience, and to the unbreakable bonds that had carried us through the darkest of storms. For in that moment, bathed in the warmth of the fading light, and surrounded by the people I loved most in this world, I knew that we had truly emerged from the shadows, battered, perhaps, but unbroken and more united than ever before. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with new challenges and obstacles to overcome. But as I looked around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a surge of confidence and determination. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. A family forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by the knowledge that our love and loyalty to one another was unshakable. Marla's poisonous legacy had been purged, and in its place a new chapter was beginning. One written in the bonds of unbreakable family, resilience, and hope for a brighter tomorrow.